네, 여러분 안녕하십니까?
Good morning, everyone.
아마 올해는 코로나 팬데믹으로 인해서
Because of
많은
the
분들께서
COVID-19
시간을
pandemic, you
겪으셨을 겁니다.
must be going
하지만
through
그렇지만
difficult
이
times.
위기를 다시
However,
한번
at this
기회로
crisis,
만드는
we can
저력을
turn the
우리 모두가
crisis
발휘했으면
into the
좋겠습니다.
opportunity.
네, 인사가 좀 늦었습니다. 국토교통부 그리고 자율협력주행 산업발전협의회가
And this is hosted by the Ministry of the Land Infrastructure and Transportation and the Korea Creative Automated Development Industry Council, and this is organized by the ITS Korea Omni-Air, Korea Express Corporation, and KOTI. My name is Kim Min-ae. It is my great pleasure to be here with you today. On the YouTube, there must be many people who are gathered here today. I wholeheartedly welcome all of you. And this is the time for the information exchange for the further development of the CITS. We have experts and scholars in and out of Korea so that we can get prepared for the future era after the COVID-19. We're going to talk about the autonomous vehicle, communication, security, global trend, standardization, and even the certificates. In addition to that, it is the high time for us to measure how Korea is advanced when it comes to the CITS. Please tune in and stay with us till the end of the event. I would like to briefly tell you about today's event. This year, unfortunately, because of the COVID-19, we have online event, as you can see. Here, we have only limited number of the resources and the staff members, and the speakers are joining us online. For those of you who are watching us, you can tune in to the YouTube channel we are opening right now. We are providing the two language services, Korean and English. And I would like to tell you more about today's seminars. There will be presentations. After each presentation, we're gonna have a short Q&A right after the presentation. If you have any question on the YouTube channel, please write down your question and we will try our best to answer your question. We do not have a separate panel discussion today. If you have a question, right after the presentation, please write down your question on the YouTube channel. Before we start the presentation, to commemorate this event from the Ministry of the Land, Infrastructure and Transportation, Director General Yoon sent his message. Let's see him with this video clip.
Glad to see all of you. I am Director Yoon Jin-hwan from the Ministry of Land. It's meaningful to hold this event so that we can share our ideas and information. I'm very happy to see all of you. I'd like to express my gratitude to the Cooperative Alternative Driving Industry Development Council, Intelligent Transport Society of Korea, Korean Express Corporation, and Korea Transport Institute for preparing this event today. Thank you. My deepest gratitude also goes to those attending this event online and offline with great interest and affection for the autonomous driving industry. Thank you for joining us on and offline. This year marked the third year of the CITS KE Plug test, which was launched in 2018. This is third year. I'm very pleased to see this year's KE Plug Fest richer than ever because you have a special event as well. They will give a meaningful opportunity to learn the trend of the industry as well as the technology-related autonomous driving, both home and overseas. K-Block Fest is essential for the establishment of a CITS infrastructure. Developers of a cooperative, they will get together and share information and knowledge so that we can secure interoperability. So this event is very timely. I believe that it will lay the foundation for us to establish the CITS. The Korean government is prepared for the nationwide establishment of a CITS based on the experience that we have so far. And from next year, we will launch the project in a full scale and complete by 2025. Through this, Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport pursue the world's first commercialization of the Level 4 autonomous vehicle in 2027. I strongly believe that you are to play a very essential role in going beyond the commercialization toward the popularization of autonomous vehicle. I hope that this event serves as a cornerstone or foundation for promoting the era of a fully autonomous vehicle or driving. Once again, I'd like to express my thanks to all of you for attending this event and wish you all happiness and health. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the wonderful comment. Thank you very much for your speech. Now, we are going to start the sessions. The first speaker is the keynote speaker. The first keynote speaker is the futurist, and he's going to tell us that we need to have the global awareness. We need to develop the global awareness. And please welcome Professor William Hall from the Washington University.
I speak a few words of Korean, but not very much. It's good to be here with you. I'm Professor William Hallel, George Washington University, and the founder of TechCast. TechCast is one of the best forecasting systems in the world. I started it 20 years ago, and we have received such wonderful attention from business people and government people that we kept improving the system, and now I think it is probably the best foresight system in the world. I am not an expert on transportation systems, but I know something about transportation. And what we do know is we have good forecasts on 3 or 4 key technologies in transportation, and I know a great deal about the future as a whole. So what I want to do is to give you a broad overview of the things that are going to be affecting transportation in the next 10 years, the things that you should be planning for and thinking about. So let's get started. Now here's where I want to start. We want to talk about the new global order that is emerging. It's become clear now, I think, because of the pandemic, really, and other crises like climate change, that the present global order is not sustainable. Most people know this. If you stop average people on the street and ask them if they think the present system is sustainable, if it will get us into the future, they will say no, they do not think it will. So I think it's commonly understood that we have a serious problem. And the only real solution, I think, is for a different mindset, a different form of consciousness, different values and beliefs. And so I want to frame my presentation in terms of global consciousness. This is something that TechCast has worked on for the last half year or so since the pandemic arrived, and we've tested these ideas. We think 5 main ideas describe pretty effectively where the world has to go if we want to survive. This is not a utopian fantasy. It's not wishful thinking. This is what we think is needed to survive. And most people understand this. They think this makes good sense. So these are the 5 principles that I've organized my talk around. And now we're going to go to the first principle: treat the Earth and all life forms as... Well, let me mention all 5 of them here. The first is treat the Earth and all life forms as sacred. The second is manage the world as a unified whole. The third is collaborate with stakeholders to serve collective needs. The fourth is embrace diversity as an asset. And the fifth is celebrate community. We think these are 5 key ideas that everybody should be thinking about if we are going to make it into the next 20 years or so. Think of it as the kind of vision that we use in business. If we want to introduce a new product or a new venture or a new company in business, any change, we start with a vision. We have to have a vision of where we're going to go, what this change is going to look like. And if we can envision something that is tangible, that's real, that makes good sense, then we can accomplish it. So that's what this is. It's a vision for where we think the world has to go if we're going to survive. So let's turn to the first of these principles: treat the earth and all life forms as sacred. Okay, now I think the transportation industry has a big job here, because you contribute somewhere between 30 and 50% of all greenhouse gases. That I think this is true. Some countries are worse than others. The United States, for instance, is one of the worst. I think we contribute 47% of the world's greenhouse gases, something like that. So I think transportation has a lot of work to do. You have to clean up the industry, in short. And we also, not only pollution, greenhouse gases, but also the problems of congestion and the noise of travel, the stress of travel, people commuting, spending an hour in their car, going to their job, then coming back when it's difficult going through traffic, and the time that they waste. So these are the problems, I think, that the transportation industry faces now, and that you're going to have to deal with successfully in the next 10 or 20 years. Now, there's a lot of help here, because alternative fuels are now becoming a reality. They used to occupy just a few percent of the total energy mix 10 years or so ago, but now it's changed dramatically. Solar and wind are the fastest growing sources of energy right now. They are growing faster than oil. They're cheaper than oil. So solar, wind, and biofuels, we think, will produce 30% of energy by about 2027, plus or minus 3 years. Right now, it's about 20%, I think. Everything, including hydropower, nuclear power, biofuels, biomass, solar, wind, including all of the alternative energy sources, the things that are not oil and gas, including all of them. It's about 20% now, and we think it's increasing dramatically, almost doubling every 2 years. Very much like computer power. Computer power has doubled every 2 years. That's roughly what's happening in energy, alternative energy. It's doubling almost every 2 years. So it's about 20, but it's only the solar and wind that's doubling. Hydro and nuclear are fairly stable. But solar and wind, although they occupy a small portion, like less than 5% now, of global energy use, they are going to double every 2 years or so. And so we expect about 30% of all energy globally to be produced by alternative energy sources at about 2027. And now let's move to autonomous vehicles, which is the thing you are most concerned about, I know. We estimate that intelligent self-driving cars will reach the takeoff point. 50% adoption, 15%, 15% adoption by about 2023, just 2 or 3 years. We're almost there now. It's very close. There's a lot of self-driving technology out there now, but it's not as good as it has to be if it's going to really enter the mainstream. So we think the technology will improve in the next 2 or 3 years, and it should start to enter the mainstream. It should reach a takeoff point where it grows dramatically in just 2 or 3 years. Now look at the alternative sources of energy being used in automobiles. Electric and solar cars, we think, will go mainstream. That's 30% adoption, about 2030. It's going to take a little time. There are a lot of electric cars out there now, but it's not really good enough to match gasoline-powered internal combustion engine. Hybrids, of course, are one thing. Hybrids are very popular now, but true electrics will take another 10 years, mainly because of the battery problem. It's getting better, but it'll take a little time. And so we think in about 10 years, we should see electric cars become mainstream, a 30% adoption. And that could include solar as well. The energy may come from solar plants located at a distance, but as an engineer, speaking as an engineer, it makes perfect sense, I think, if we were to put solar cells on the roofs of cars, on the trunks of cars, and the hoods of cars, any place the sun shines. Solar power is effective now, and it's cheap. And so I think we could see progressive car manufacturers start outfitting their cars with solar cells. And I hope we do it. I think it makes perfect sense. You would just leave the car sitting in the sun all day, and it would charge itself. So that's going to take about 10 years for electric and possibly solar cars. Also, I think we should be saying a great deal about the move in the culture of car ownership and transportation. We need to change culture from owning cars to mobility, so that people don't necessarily have to own cars to be mobile, and that they can use all of these mobile services that are becoming available, like Lyft and Uber and self-driving taxis and trains and all of that sort of thing. So that, I think, is an important change that your industry should be encouraging, to get people worldwide to understand that car ownership is not the only way to get transportation. That public transportation and private transportation forms are going to be the main form that many of us should use in a few years. And then I think about the problems with big vehicles like aircraft and ships and trucks. They consume a lot of power, a lot of energy. So they are going to move, I think, to a different model, hybrids that use electric storage and also biofuel and solar. All of these are being used now in airplanes and trucks and ships, and I think they should become the mainstream in a few years. I'd be happy to take any questions that people have on any of this, or I'm ready to move on. Okay? Let's move to the second principle: manage the world as a unified whole. This is important because the pandemic, for instance, has made it clear that nations and corporations would be far more effective if we could work together. That doesn't mean we have to give up our individual freedoms or our individual ways of doing things. We can still do that. We can maintain our individuality, our own cultures, our own personalities, and freedoms. But where it makes sense, we should be working together. And that's going to be increasingly important as we face these big problems of pandemics. There are going to be more pandemics, climate change, energy transition, the inequality that we see in economies. All of these major problems, they're huge, and they're going to require people to work together. An idea that comes to my mind, I don't know what's going on in your industry, but it would make perfect sense to pool technology research in transportation into 3 or 4 global centers. They could be run by governments or private industry, and they could have their own staffs from all over the world working together on the major breakthroughs that are needed in transportation, the basic research. And then they could have members. Corporations, auto manufacturers, governments would be members, and they would, for maybe paying an annual fee of a couple $100,000 or something, they would have access to that knowledge. Now, so this would really, I think, increased progress in transportation dramatically, because every company would not have to do this from scratch. It would be more effective if we concentrated our efforts into a few research centers instead of duplicating all of these efforts. And then the users would share the technology breakthroughs. I think it'd be a very powerful thing. This should be a major initiative, I think, for the world as a whole. The car makers of the world should get together and with their governments and organize research centers for transportation. And then I suppose this is happening now, but you need global standards for how cars are designed so that they can be sold across the world and used by people from different countries. Standards for emissions, that's really going to be critical. We should have standards for emissions of greenhouse gases, and there should be some kind of a tax paid for vehicles that emit greenhouse gases. That would be the best way to control this, through a tax on carbon. That's it's being done in many parts of the world, and it doesn't have to hurt the economy. If this were done properly, it could boost economic growth, because the way to do it best would be to take the tax revenue and return it back into the economy, give it to the citizens as a greenhouse tax dividend, or you could call it something else, just a dividend, and invest it in corporations that are doing energy and doing research in transportation or in conservation. So the funds could be returned into the economy, so they would not hurt economic growth. They could, in fact, help economic growth. And they would be phased in, of course, over a period of years so that corporations and individuals could adjust to the changes. That would really be a big help, I think. And then generally, I think there's a need for partnerships among nations and corporations to handle these challenges. These are enormous challenges that are coming over the next 10 years to transform the entire transportation system of the world. It's going to be a big job. It's going to take a lot of people, a lot of money, and a lot of work. And I think it would be a lot easier if corporations and nations could work together on that. I'm going to move to the next slide. Now, this is really important, I think. The role of business is changing dramatically. The pandemic and climate change and other crises that we've been talking about have made it clear that the present economic system is not doing its work. It's creating profits and big gains in the stock markets, but it's not solving all of these social problems. It's not helping employees enough. It's not helping communities. It's not solving the climate problem and all of those other big social problems that are out there. And so I think there's a consensus, a common understanding in many countries around the world now that we have to change the economic system. We don't want to do away with free markets and free enterprise. That is basic. That has to remain. We're not talking about socialism. We're talking about transforming the basic unit of free enterprise, the corporation, the business firm, into a system that serves all of the stakeholders instead of investors alone, instead of focusing on profit alone. So this is perfectly compatible with free enterprise. In fact, this would be a more powerful form of free enterprise. It would be a kind of democratic free enterprise, a free enterprise system that serves all of the stakeholders, and by doing that, it serves the needs of society as well as making money for shareholders. And if this were done well, it would be a competitive advantage. I want to stress that. This is not the same thing as social responsibility, where you're just doing good. The corporation has to be competitive in a free market system. So it has to create value. And if we did this properly by collaborating with the various stakeholders, with employees and customers and communities, to solve strategic problems, then you could create more value. You could create value for employees and communities and also for investors. I think investors could see better returns, better profits if we were to work together more effectively. I know that's a big challenge, but some Asian countries have been doing this really all along. The Japanese have done this, I think, intuitively for many years, and now I think we have to do it on a bigger scale. Now, here's the fourth principle: embrace diversity as an asset. Diversity is one of the problems in the world today. That there's so much hostility between different groups of people. Terrorism, for instance, terrible problem, and all this conflict that goes on. That's unnecessary, and we can't really afford it any longer if we're going to have a world that works. And so we should think of differences as an asset. People who are different have different sources of knowledge, different cultures that are valuable, and we can learn from them. We can all benefit if we learn to embrace the differences among people. This was me giving a talk in Malaysia, for instance, and it just shows that we can talk to each other all around the world and do it very effectively. I give talks all over the world, and I find it very effective, very useful. We all learn. I learn, and the people in those countries learn. So it's important to learn how to embrace these differences of culture and people and different transportation forms. To create good modern transportation systems, we need to use a variety of modes, like automobiles, trains, and self-driving taxis. So the transportation systems should include a variety of different assets. Here's the last slide I want to talk about briefly, and that is the need for community, to celebrate community. Community is where all of this begins and where it ends. There has to be a community of people in the world who understand the new modes of transportation and embrace them and are prepared to use them and to build them. So we have to celebrate the changes in community, in transportation communities, like your conference on international test of the international interoperability test, international seminar rather, excuse me. Your conference is a good example of the need for community in transportation. So I commend you for what you're doing, and I think we should be doing more of this. Thank you for your attention. I hope you found this useful. And remember, the key that you should be keeping in mind to guide you through these changes for the next 10 or 20 years are the principles of global consciousness. These 5 principles are, I think, the key elements of the vision that we need to see us through this difficult change. And if you keep them in mind, I think it'll help you make your changes more effective. Thank you for your attention. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much for the wonderful talks about the way forward for the autonomous driving. Thank you very much, Professor Hala. Now let's open the Q&A session, and I would like to call up Professor Hala.
Hi, Min.
Hi. So first of all, thank you for joining us and also sharing your valuable insight as well.
It's my great pleasure. 반갑습니다.
You're very accurate to pronounce Korean word. Well, we have several questions for you, so we would appreciate if you could answer this question. Okay?
Sure.
Okay. first question is, you mentioned that there are many autonomous driving technology, but it should be improved to join the rank of mainstream. So I wonder that what part of this technology should be enhanced?
Well, as you and your listeners probably know, there are systems that chart the development of autonomous vehicles through various stages, like 5 stages. And our experts on TechCast think that we are in the early stages yet, stages 1 and 2, where the vehicle will operate well under excellent conditions where there's no adverse weather and the roads are well marked. And there's probably a need for a human to supervise the car. So that's where we are now, I think. There's a lot of self-driving being done, but it's under those limited conditions. It's going to take some big improvements, I think, before we reach the takeoff point. The takeoff point is, we think, at about 15% adoption, where adoption starts growing very dramatically. We're not there yet. That's going to take another 2 or 3 years, we think. And it's going to require better artificial intelligence so that the cars are steered more safely. Safety, I think, is the big issue here. There are concerns about safety. And also the need to handle different driving conditions like weather. So that's where the improvements have to be made in safety and handling different driving conditions. That's going to take a few years, we think.
Okay, thank you for your answer. And now I move to the second question. The question is, well, you've also mentioned that several Asian countries have a system that satisfy all the stakeholders. So could you give us basic example of it?
Well, I think the Japanese have done this really traditionally. Ever since the industrial age has been upon us, they intuitively have understood that a healthy society requires corporations to work with their employees, provide job security and good training, and to serve the needs of customers and the nation and so forth. So the Japanese, I think, are a model of what's being done here. There are lots of other examples. The Tata Group in India has been doing this for many centuries. They take good care of their employees, and their employees are faithful to the company. They get better productivity and so forth. There are European companies like IKEA. IKEA works with their suppliers to improve the goods that are being used in their furniture and reduce costs, and it helps the suppliers as well. So the key is collaboration. I mentioned that in my talk, and I want to stress it again. This can't be simply responsibility, because the corporation has to compete in a free market, and so value has to be created, and that requires collaboration with stakeholders, working together to solve strategic problems. That, I think, is really important.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Well, Mr. Halar, thank you for your keynote speech and answers as well, and we hope we could have you in person here to talk about more.
Thank you, man. 감사합니다.
Okay, bye. 네, 여러분 한라 교수님의 답변까지 들어보는 시간이었습니다.
And that was Professor Halar. Thank you very much. Now let's move on to the second speaker. Second speaker is ready for you.
We have Jason Coney from Omni Air, and he will be talking about the testing and certificate around the world. Okay, first and foremost.
Hello, Mr. Coney.
Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me to present to you.
Okay, thank you. We will also thank you for joining us today. So it seems that you're ready to begin your presentation.
I believe so. Can you see my presentation?
No, please share your presentation while on the screen.
Oh, I am sharing my
Oh,
screen.
yes,
now.
we can see your presentation
Oh, you
while
can
on the
see?
screen. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And I just wanted to say good morning and welcome. It is such a pleasure to speak with each of you today. And I would like to say what an honor it is to be invited to present to the ITS Korea K-Plug test. I had the opportunity to attend the 2018 K Plug Test. And I saw the hard work and dedication that was put forth over the week by many great companies who are developing these wonderful life-saving technologies. Omniair has just concluded its own PlugFest. I will talk a little bit about that, but I know how much hard work goes into that, and I just wanted to congratulate ITS Korea and all of the companies that are working so hard to make this week a success. So let me start by talking a little bit about Omniair Consortium and our role in the connected vehicle world. And I'll talk a little bit about some of our partnership with ITS Korea, or where we are with our certification programs now, and where we hope to be very soon. And I'll also talk about some of the results from our Omniair Global PlugFest, which we held during the month of October at 6 locations around the world, including in Korea. So Omniair, for many of you who may not be familiar with our organization, is a certification body and a trade association. We are exclusively focused on the development of testing and certification programs for several technologies related to transportation. On the tolling side, we have tested and certified RFID tolling tags and readers, which are used in the United States for toll collection, and we have certified those since 2012. In 2017, Omniair launched the world's first certification program for dedicated short-range communications technologies. And we are continuing to develop new certification programs to meet the continuing development of transportation safety technologies, including cellular V2X. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. We have over 80 members from around the world. 25% of our members are based in North America. Or sorry, 50% of our members are based in North America, 25% in Asia, and 25% in Europe. We have 7 active working groups and subgroups working on items related to RSUs, application testing, CV2X, cybersecurity, tolling, as well as our general technical working group. These working groups meet twice a week, two times a month each, and they have been very, very busy over the past year as we're developing several new certification programs, which I'll talk about. This is a snapshot of our membership, and I think one of the strengths of Omniair is that we have the complete ecosystem involved in our membership for connected vehicles. We have automotive manufacturers, tier 1 suppliers, chipset providers, radio manufacturers, cybersecurity firms, tolling agencies, departments of transportation, test laboratories, and test equipment providers from around the world. And these organizations work very collaboratively with a singular focus, and that is developing test specifications for connected vehicle technology and for tolling technology. And it is that technical focus, and that is that open collaborative spirit that allows us to be successful. And as you can see, we have over 10 companies from Korea as part of our membership, and many of the companies who are represented in this room today are also Omniair members, and we're very appreciative of that. As I mentioned, I had the opportunity to visit at the 2018 K Plug Test in Seoul. And at that time, Omniair and ITS Korea signed an historic accord. We signed a memorandum of understanding to help advance testing and certification for connected vehicles. And since that time, our organizations have met on a quarterly basis and have continued to share information, helping to strengthen the certification programs both in Korea and in the United States. Our goal is to have alignment of these programs, a mutual recognition, and a joint certification mark. And we're working toward that goal. The results of this PlugFest testing will be shared with Omniair's membership at our November 18th membership meeting, in the same way that we are today sharing the results of the Global PlugFest with the organization. And we are very appreciative of this partnership, and we look forward to growing that partnership and strengthening it over time. As I mentioned, Omniair has several certification programs, both in tolling and in connected vehicles. We offer independent third-party testing and certification in partnership with a network of ISO 17025 accredited laboratories that have been audited directly by Omniair as well, and are considered Omniair authorized test laboratories. We use qualified test equipment and validated validated tests for our certification program. There are over 120 tests that are part of our DSRC certification program for OVUs, and that rises to over 150 for RSUs. I would note that 3 of our laboratories are actually based in Korea: KATEC, TTA, and Bureau Veritas Korea, and they are strong partners that help us to move these programs forward. So why certification? In the United States and in Europe and other places around the world, certification is relied on by those who are deploying these technologies to ensure that they are trusted communications devices, that they conform to industry standards, that they meet minimal interoperability and security requirements. And Omniair certification provides notice to the agencies, the public agencies that are deploying these technologies, that a third-party laboratory, an independent laboratory, has tested and certified that device. That certification mark is an indication that it meets all of the Omniair requirements. We have an online directory that agencies can reference when choosing a technology for deployment. And only those devices that have been carefully scrutinized, have been determined to be interoperable, will receive Omniair certification. We do have an ongoing surveillance program, so we wish to maintain the integrity of the certification program by constantly surveilling those devices. So, Omniair Plugfests are in many ways very similar to the event that you're undertaking this week. This year, given the global pandemic, we had to do our Plugfest a little bit differently. As I mentioned, we have devices, manufacturers, test labs, test equipment providers around the world. Many countries have limited travel. Even within the United States, we have found it difficult for companies to travel from state to state. So we conducted this plug test to allow for remote testing in partnership with several test laboratories in different locations around the world. In some cases, we offered field testing on-site and some laboratory testing on-site. And so as a result, we were able to provide a robust testing experience wherever the engineering teams were around the world. And I'm so excited to share some of the results. As you can see, this event stretched over a 3-week period. We began in Austin and Malaga, Spain, the week of September 28th. We partnered with DEKRA in Malaga, and in Austin, we partnered with the City of Austin, which has both a DSRC testbed as well as a C-V2X testbed. And you can see from this chart the number of test equipment providers at each location. We then next moved to Korea with testing the second week by TTA and by Bureau Veritas Korea. In the third week, we moved back to the United States with testing at SGS in San Diego and at Bureau Veritas Detroit as well. So you can see here that we had a number of different test systems providers that were active in this Plugfest. SEA, Keysight, Anritsu, Rohde & Schwarz, Spirent. The V2X Hub is a collaboration between the Federal Highway Administration and Leidos Technologies, Southwest Research Institute, Nordsys, and then others that were involved, U.S. Department of Transportation, as well as National Telecommunications and Infrastructure Association Administration also participated. This was very important, as many of the test equipment providers are just beginning to develop and refine their testing for cellular V2X technologies. I would note that we had approximately 20 devices, and of those 20 devices, all but 3 were cellular V2X. And I think that's an important inflection point in the United States as there is a competition between the two technologies, and it demonstrates to us where we think the market is shifting. In addition to test equipment providers, we were supported by a number of PKI providers or security certificate providers who assisted us with security certificates. AutoCrypt from Korea, BlackBerry from Canada, Scrypt from Canada, Green Hills Integrity Security Services from the United States, and Microsoft from Hungary. This helped us to also test interoperability between devices utilizing different security certificate providers. We have a number of test cases surrounding the SCMS, surrounding 1609.2, and also CAMP requirements. You'll hear more about this from David Suquino, who is the president of Integrity Security Services and the founder of that company. I'm so excited that he'll be speaking with you just after me. So the tests that we provided for the PlugFest, we did this in 2 areas, one for DSRC devices and again for cellular V2X devices. As I mentioned, we launched our certification program for DSRC in 2017. About 1 year ago today, we began working on developing a set of test cases for cellular V2X. And we stood up a technical working group that was focused exclusively on C-V2X communications. We used the dedicated, the DSRC test cases as a starting point, and then we made modifications where were necessary, and we addressed new standards such as 3161 where necessary, and we offered testing, we incorporated testing against the 3GPP test cases. And you can see the testing that we were able to accomplish at this PlugFest, and we are actually on Tuesday balloting the final version of our initial release for C-V2X certification. So I am able to announce today that on the air by December, we'll be able to offer certification both for DSRC and C-V2X. So it's very, very exciting news. This, of course, is our the standards that we have tested against for DSRC. We continue to offer certification testing for DSRC. It's an important technology around the world, and there is some change that's happening in the United States with respect to the spectrum, but there will be a transition period where DSRC will continue to be very, very important. So we'll continue to offer this as well. This is a snapshot of the many different test cases that our technical working group has been hard at work in developing and balloting out, and we expect to publish this to the membership after Tuesday's vote. I do know that these test cases have been shared with several of our laboratories and with ITS Korea, and we hope that you're able to utilize these as part of this K-Plug test, and we look forward to feedback because that is how we will improve our test cases. And so the work that you're doing is incredibly important, not just to ITS Korea, but also to OmniAir. So what are some of the lessons learned? And so as a general, let me say this, as a general matter, cellular V2X is an early stage technology that has a great promise, and it has the promise of scalability, and some would suggest that it has greater capabilities than DSRC, but it is at an earlier stage. What we saw with the devices was very similar to the state of DSRC devices 3 years ago. And in those 3 years, we've seen vast improvements. We do 2 PlugFests a year, and those devices have improved each time. We've certified a number of devices. They have benefited from a number of pilot projects. But for cellular V2X, these are still new. And one of the issues that we've uncovered is the timing issues. The GPS and GNSS timing issues are incredibly sensitive, and so additional attention in testing needs to be paid to that. Test equipment, by and large, it has been doing very well. We hope to have at least 3 qualified test systems within the next 6 months that can be utilized by authorized test laboratories. But there are still learnings, and you can see this evident here on the screen. Also, there is a need for TCI version 3. We do not believe that all the test equipment providers were able to do that. And I think that's all I'll say about that. So post-plug testing, we're continuing to do testing with 2 C-V2X OBUs and walking through 1609 and J2945. We are continuing to address tunneling issues with IPv6 and the SCMS, and I'm sure that David will have something to say about that very, very shortly. And we expect to have a full report on the aggregated anonymized results within the next 2 weeks. And we'll be more than happy to share with you. So what steps are necessary between now and the end of December when we hope to launch this program? The finalization of test cases, and that's been happening over the past 2 weeks. We expect that final balloting to happen on Tuesday. There are some standards that have yet to be final released. We are basing our test cases off of what we believe is the final draft of these standards, but the ball may continue to bounce, and we will have to adjust our test cases accordingly. And this is with IEEE 1609 as well as with NEMA TS10. And we'll begin our test laboratory audit and our test equipment qualification during the month of November. If you are interested in having your test systems qualified, do let us know. We do want to begin that process, and we'll be giving priority to those that apply first. And I would be remiss if I did not remark on some recent activity that has happened in the United States in the past week. As many of you know, there has been a long discussion about the use of the 5.9 gigahertz spectrum in the United States for the past as many as 10 years. I began my career in the ITS industry some 20 years ago, where we thought that DSRC deployment would be happening much more quickly. And DSRC deployment has been slow for a variety of reasons in the U.S., but it has picked up steam in the past several years. But recognizing that this slow deployment, as well as the spectrum needs for Wi-Fi and for others that are seeking access to a very limited bands of spectrum, the Federal Communications Commission has entered into a notice of proposed rulemaking. They issued that nearly 1 year ago today, where they would propose to split the band. The 75 megahertz of spectrum dedicated for ITS would be split with 30 megahertz dedicated to cellular V2X and 45 megahertz dedicated to Wi-Fi or to unlicensed devices. The 30 megahertz is in the upper part of the band. Just last week, Chairman Ajit Pai announced his proposed rules, and his proposed rules would dedicate the entire 30 megahertz to cellular V2X. The lower 45 would go to Wi-Fi, and a 1-year transition period is contemplated. And so there is a vote scheduled on November 18th, where we expect the Commission to rule unanimously in favor of this. But a lot of things can happen between now and then. Notably, on Tuesday, there is an election in the United States, and that may have some impact. Also, there are concerted policy discussions within the U.S. government as to whether this is, in fact, the best policy moving forward. But our expectation is that at the end of November, we will have regulatory certainty. And in many ways, that regulatory certainty, whether it's for DSRC or C-V2X, is a good thing, because that will allow companies to start making investments, allow agencies to make long-term deployment plans. So having that certainty is incredibly important, even though we don't necessarily agree with giving away half of the spectrum. It is important to have that and we're excited to see things move forward. And from Omnia's perspective, we'll be ready to provide certification, whether that's C-V2X or DSRC. And with that, I welcome your questions, and I thank you so much for allowing me to share this with you today.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Conley. We are going to have a Q&A session with you. Well, wow, we have quite a lot of questions for you. So the
goodness.
first question is, well, as far as I know, the draft 13 is the latest version. So I wonder that when IEEE 1609.2.1 was standardized.
So, as I understand, .2.1 is still in final balloting. And so when we develop our test cases, we are developing those on the final, what we believe will be the final draft. If it turns out that the final version changes, we will of course change our test cases and amend that. But I understand that it's in final balloting. And Mr. Sequino may have some additional thoughts on that during his Q&A.
Okay, the next question is, well, it seems that there are some missing part of existing SCMS, such as policy. So my question is, how do you respond with SCMS adopting 2.1?
So there are missing policy with the SCMS. So there was a great deal of policy consideration in the United States for how to govern the SCMS. There have been studies and reports by the U.S. Department of Transportation. There have been recommendations on how to do that, but I do not think that the U.S. DOT has taken a final action on that. And so Omniair does not involve itself in those governance or policy discussions.
Okay, the third question is, in the standard, well, it seems that there are some part that Europe can also refer to. So do you have any plan to refer to? Like ACPC?
Well, let me say this with respect to Europe. We have offered testing against ETSI specifications at prior PlugFests, including our PlugFest in Malaga, Spain. We do share quite a bit of information from our European members and try to incorporate those standards where necessary. But in terms of offering certification against the ETSI standards or against the ETSI test specifications, it's something that we are considering, but we want to move carefully as we move into the European market.
Okay, the next question is, as far as I know, IEEE 1609.2.1 is currently in draft. So I wonder that when you just conduct a plug test, which version of 1609.2.1 is used?
So we use the latest draft version that is available. To our members who are also IEEE members, we've worked very collaboratively with that certification body as well as with the leaders of those particular working groups. But we recognize that there is a balloting process that's underway and that we will change our test cases accordingly should that draft standard change.
Okay, and the next question is when it comes to Global Plug Fest, and I wonder that is it possible between the element of SCMS certification, in specific between PCA and LA or LA, your test is also possible between them?
So what was the question was SCMS certification?
Yes. So I mean,
certification of SCMS systems?
Yes.
Well, then I will certainly defer that question to my good friend David Sequino. We've had several recommendations to consider certification, testing and certification of entire SCMS systems. And this is not the first time we've heard that recommendation. But I think I would rather defer to Mr. Sequino on that very interesting question.
Okay, and the next question is, as far as I know, standardization of SAE J3161 made in 2020 is underway in relation to CB2X. So based on which version the Plugfest is conducted?
So we have we froze our test cases in mid-September. So the version that was available at that time is the version that we used at Plugfest. We understand that there are comments that are being received by the through that working group, and we're aware of those comments, and we do expect to have that final version very, very shortly. But of course, our certification program and our Plugfest testing has to work with the standards as they are. And in some cases, whether that's TS10, 1609.2.1, or 3161, there is still some finalization that's happening. So while we will begin qualification of test equipment and we will begin authorization of laboratories, we will not be able to begin the certification testing until of devices until those standards have been published formally.
Okay, this is the last question. Well, there are many entities expressed their concerns regarding FCC's 5.9 gigahertz, like US DOT. So I wonder your just approach and your position of OmniAir about it.
So last year, when the notice of proposed rulemaking was issued, OmniAir filed comments, and our comments stated very clearly that the full 75 megahertz should be preserved for ITS transportation safety applications. We did not take a position on CB to X versus DSRC, but we feel very, very that the full spectrum should be preserved, and that, we did raise with the Commission a number of issues regarding out-of-band interference. We're very concerned about having the very large channels of outdoor broadcast of Wi-Fi adjacent to the band.
Okay, thank you for your answers and also sharing your valuable insight. So, Mr. Conley, thank you.
Thank you so much.
네, 이로써 제이슨 콘니님의 연설과 그리고
That was the presentation and Q&A from the Jason Conley. Thank you very much. As I told you before, you can post your questions on the YouTube, and we are going to try to get your questions. Now it is time for the final presentation of the morning session. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the third speaker for today. The third speaker for today is working for the Integrity Security Service. We have Mr. David Sequino. He's going to tell us about the trend of the global SCMS.
Hello, Mr. Sequino. Hello, can you hear me?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so please begin your presentation.
Okay, very good. Hello, my name is David Sequino, and I'm the founder and president of Integrity Security Services, ISS for short. And it's a pleasure, and I appreciate you inviting me to your ITS Korea 2020 K Plugfest. A little bit about Integrity Security Services. We were founded in 2010. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of a larger company called Green Hills Software. We are hardware and platform agnostic, meaning that we can run on any CPU or OS combination. We are end-to-end security experts. Today we secure over 20 auto OEMs, and we are the founders of the SCMS Manager, which is the security certification and standards body for security credential management systems in North America. And my team has over 250 years of experience, and we've secured over 1 billion devices, primarily in the auto industry. A little bit of background about ISS in the ITS and the SCMS space. In 2013, General Motors commissioned us to build the first commercial security credential management system for their Cadillac CTS. In 2014, the Collision Avoidance Metrics Partnership commissioned us to build the proof of concept security credential management system for all of the major OEMs that were part of the CAMP consortium. In 2016, we built the first online SCMS, which our product name is CMS Certificate Management System, which many of you may have touched in the past. This is for commercial use. We also raised the national route for North America for V2X and cellular V2X. And then in 2017, we received our Web Trust version 2.0 certification for our route, and we run everything in an ISO 27001, 27002 certified data center. We contracted with several other OEMs to issue V2X certificates for their vehicles. We issue the certificates for all of OmniAir's plug fests, whether they're in Europe, Asia, or North America. And also in 2017 at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, we were the first to demo a system that could do over-the-air updates over a cellular AT&T network to a Delphi onboard unit, and to demonstrate revocation and demonstrate top-offs to the systems. In 2018, the U.S. Department of Transportation contracted with ISS to supply all the V2X certificates for the connected vehicle pilots in North America, and Australia contracted with us to raise the route for their country CITS system and provide all the certificates for all of their pilots. In 2019, we provisioned all the cellular V2X RSUs and OBUs for state projects across the United States, and then the US DOT commissioned us to deliver the first global misbehavior authority for revocation. And then in 2019, we also provided all of the certs for the ETSI Plugfest in France in conjunction with OmniAir, and we provide the cellular V2X certificates for Australia as well. And then in 2020, this year, we launched the SCMS Manager, which is a standards body that works in conjunction with OmniAir that does the testing, and SCMS does all of the standards writing specifically for security as it relates to the SCMS ecosystem. So the security that might go in an end entity unit or an OBU or an RSU. We raised all of the electors to follow the CAMP standard in North America to manage any new routes in the North American ecosystem. And then finally, we're raising the test route for the European Union, and we're adding that to the Trust List Manager in Europe. We have a very extensive ecosystem. We have many subscribers to our SCMS system, which we call CMS. At the OEM level, you can see the names. At the OBU or RSU level, we've worked with almost every supplier globally. At the Tier 2 level, the chips that go into the OBUs or RSUs, we've worked extensively with provisioning certificates for the chips themselves. We've worked extensively with many state and local DOTs, test houses through OmniAir, of course, and then finally many consultants that work with us to ensure that all of the security policies that we're initiating through SCMS Manager are secure throughout the ecosystem. as I said earlier, Australia relies on us. They're a certified ISS CMS partner. We've raised the roof for their countrywide system, and we provide all the certificates for them. A little bit about some of the use cases that SCMS can help with, and this presentation is really about SCMS in North America. And fundamentally, when this was conceived back in 2014, 6 years ago, it was very simple for the US DOT and NHTSA. We wanted to save lives. So historically, there's 1.3 million fatal car crashes globally. That's 3,287 deaths per day. I mean, think about that. That is many, many 747s crashing globally every single day to meet that number. And we would not let that exist in the FAA. Boeing had its MAX 8 grounded after 2 crashes, and for whatever the reason on our roads, we allow this to happen. From 2015 to 2019 in the United States, there's been an increase of 5.8% of fatal crashes, 67% of which are vehicle occupants, 14% of which are motorcycles, and 19% of which are non-vehicle occupants. Another obviously very important issue for all of us is congestion in our cities. And at the end, you guys can guess which of these pictures are in Korea, but I made sure I picked 3 or 4 pictures from Korea. But this is a global issue, whether you're in Paris, London, Los Angeles, New York City, Seoul. Congestion is a nightmare, and we have to solve this problem, and ITS systems will solve this problem, and SCMS has to play a role in this, because to ensure that communication between vehicles and roadside units and traffic management centers are secure, you have to issue certificates to every single vehicle and every device that works on the network. Work zones, also a very, very important issue, right? Ensuring that our workers are safe, ensuring that cars can communicate, knowing when an intersection is being worked on is critical for us. So, making sure our systems and devices are secure with SCMSs that have been certified by the SCMS manager through their specs and being tested with OmniAir and OmniAir partners is critical. Long-haul trucking is a major, major issue. This is going to be one of the first things that moves towards autonomous driving, and ensuring that the certificates that are being issued to these vehicles so they can communicate effectively is very, very critical. Making sure your systems and devices are following SCMS manager specs, again, being tested by OmniAir and OmniAir partners, will be critical for the ecosystems to thrive in any part of the world, whether it's Korea, whether it's Japan, whether it's China, whether it's North America, or whether it's Europe. Emergency vehicles, also another critical use case where SCMS plays a critical role. We want to make sure that our first responders, whether it's a fire engine or an ambulance, is secure on our roads, that can move quickly to an incident through a traffic site or traffic intersection is critical. So again, ensuring that the certificates to the roadside units communicating with our emergency vehicles have been issued from a certified SCMS through the SCMS manager in North America and tested by OmniAir and OmniAir partners is fundamentally critical. Now, as far as SPAT and pedestrian safety and security, the same kind of thing. Ensuring that all of the messages have integrity and non-repudiation. And what that means to us is integrity means when the message is created and sent, it isn't changed in transport, and it is sent from a known good source. This is fundamentally critical. In North America, we have over 5,000 traffic management centers across the country. In the United States, every single TIM message that goes between The Traffic Management Center and all of the systems have to be checked for integrity and from a known good source, non-repudiation. This is critical for phase and timing. Road safety, security, monitoring, and statistics. As our traffic grows, it is critical that all of the decisions that we make are from a known good security credential management system. And again, no data cannot be trusted unless the elements of the network have been certified by SCMS Manager and Omniair. It is fundamentally critical. This is a safety critical application, and to ensure that the network is secure is critical. This is why we started SCMS Manager. This is why Omniair exists, to ensure that all systems, all network elements on the network are tested to the same standards and interoperable. This is fundamentally critical to us. This is really surprising, but in the United States, I don't know if this happens in Korea. These are kind of two funny signs where you've got Uber abuses their labor force, their drivers. Signs are being hacked in North America. This is a TIM message being sent from one place to another, and it's being hacked. This is another place where SCMS Manager can help, and using a certified SCMS provider is critical. So this leads me to what's happening in North America. I want to say a few words about SCMS Manager. This is a standards body to manage the electors, to focus on the elector route CA management, to authorize SCMS, intermediate CA signing, to look at the elector annual audits, to review the route CA annual audit, to audit the SCMSs, and for end entity certification test services selection. These are all of the elements that SCMS Manager is going to focus on. SCMS Manager will not do the testing. This is very important. This is a very focused group to focus on ensuring that the security specs and the policies and procedures are in place for all SCMSs to operate to the same standard in North America. All of the testing will be handed over to Jason and his team at Omniair and their partners to do the security testing. The SCMS Manager is made up of an organization that has 4 fundamental groups, 2 major groups, and then 4 fundamental groups. One is the Standards Board, and the other is the Ecosystem Audit Committee. Starting with the Standards Board, we have working groups. One is Policies and Procedures, the second is Technical Standards, the third is Guidance. Then there's Test Liaisons that will work with Omniair and Omniair's test partners. The third is Standards Body Liaison that will work with IEEE, SAE, and the other standards groups to ensure that the security standards coming out of SCMS are adopted globally. And then finally, the Ecosystem Audit Committee. This is a very big part of what we do. We will audit all of the electors and routes that govern any SCMS. They will look at all SCMSs in the ecosystem, and they will look at all the test certifications, ensure that every single group that's running an SCMS is operating properly and to the specifications that the SCMS Manager defines with its working groups. This is how you join SCMS Manager. I strongly recommend, if you're working in North America, to join the organization. And AutoCrypt, which is the SCMS provider from Korea, has just joined the SCMS Manager as of last week, so we welcome them to the organization. We're excited to have the participation. The cellular V2X security credential management system, there was a question about this earlier. It's a very complicated certificate authority system, or PKI, public key infrastructure. And it's complicated largely due for privacy reasons. We want to ensure that the certificates that we issue to vehicles allow for anonymity of anyone driving your vehicle. So we in North America, there were very strict privacy rules that say that if your car is subscribed subscribing to the VitaX network. We can't have people able to read the certificates or read the messages coming off your vehicle to locate where you are and locate who you are. And that's why there's so much complexity. That's why there is a pseudonym CA. That's why there's a registration authority. That's why there's a device certificate management. That's why there's an enrollment CA. That's why there's an intermediate CA. That's why there's a linkage authority. And ISS in our implementation have taken it one step further, and we've created a cloaking authority to ensure that all revocation in the CRL store is also creates a level of abstraction to ensure this level of anonymity. And then obviously we've built the misbehavior authority, which will be a common authority for all SCMSs that will reside within the SCMS manager. So building a world-class SCMS, what does that mean? What sort of certifications matter? Well, it matters that your SCMS is being run in an ISO 27001 certified data center. It matters that the routes in your country have been certified to some standard. In North America, that's what our route has been certified to, WebTrust. It matters that all of the certificates that are generated off of the hardware are generated within a NIST FIPS 140-2 Level 3 hardware security module. Some of the other standards that we look at very closely are payment card industry, because they have very strict standards. And then we want to make sure that all of the code written within the SCMS is MISRA compliant, right? So some of the concepts of WebTrust 2.0 are availability. The system is available for operation and use as committed or agreed. The security, the system is protected against unauthorized access, both physical and logical. Integrity, the system processing is complete, accurate, timely, and authorized. Confidentiality, sensitive corporate information is protected. From a policy perspective, right, from procedures, from monitoring and alerting, the system must be monitored for activity at all times, and alerts must be responded to quickly. So our data centers, to be ISO 27001 certified, we have 24-hour monitoring, we have guard gates, we have man locks, so no one can get into our data center without being pre-authorized, without having multiple people being certified to go into the data center. And then there must be real auditing. So we've used KPMG to audit us on an annual basis to ensure that we're following all of the procedures that we've defined. Privacy, this is critical. The original SCMS was designed by CAMP, as I said earlier, to ensure privacy. We cannot have an individual owner of a vehicle being tracked through the SCMS system. And then all decisions regarding any SCMS should ensure personal information is kept private. Regarding the FCC 5.9 megahertz rulemaking in North America, Jason covered this very well. I use different words, but effectively there was just a rule proposed last week, and it basically says that DSRC is to vacate the bottom 45 megahertz before the end of 2021. The top 30 megahertz will be held for cellular V2X. The rulemaking could change if President changes on January 20th, 2021. As Jason alluded to, we have a highly contested presidential election happening on Tuesday of this week. And then potentially DSRC could find higher spectrum at some point in the future. You know, one example might be for use in truck platooning or something. So there's a lot of options in this area. I'm not sure I can give you any definitive answers, but this is the latest snapshot of where the spectrum sits in North America. From a global standards perspective, everyone should be looking at SCMS Manager if you want to do business in North America. Obviously, you should be a member of Omniair as well. This is an ITS conference, so everyone should be following their local ITS recommendations. In Europe, the C2C consortium should be followed as well. We're obviously members, and you should be too. There's an IEEE, as we talked about, 1609.2. There are new standards coming out all the time. There was a question earlier about 1609.2.1, and I don't believe it's been ratified. But it should be released in January of 2021. Obviously, ETSI in Europe should be followed. That is the sister consortium to IEEE 1609.2. WebTrust, if you're going to raise a route or run your own SCMS, you should become very familiar with that. And certainly, if you're going to run an SCMS or subscribe to an SCMS, you need to ensure your SCMS provider is running their operation in an ISO 27001/2 data center. Selecting an SCMS partner, these are sort of the basics. Do they understand the global standards? Can your SCMS scale? This is a very important point. To create anonymity in the world, you need to generate a lot of certificates. It's not like an enterprise certificate authority where you have one server that gets one certificate for a year or 2 years. In the V2X world or the C2X world, in North America, there's approximately 1,020 certificates that get issued to a vehicle, and there are 20 per week that get rotated through. So you have 50 weeks a year times 20, that's how you get to 1,000 certificates. But if you multiply that by 17 million new cars in North America times 1,000, you get to 17 billion certificates. It's an enormous number. So it's not easy to generate that many certificates if you're actually using real secure hardware to do it. So you need to ensure that your provider can scale. We've spent the last 7 or 8 years ensuring that our system can scale. Has your SCMS been tested in production at scale? Does your SCMS provider have global experience? Does your SCMS provider understand all the use cases? Has your SCMS provider been certified to security standards? These are the fundamental questions everyone should be asking as we roll the system out. This is how to register for our SCMS. Simply go to ghsiss.com/V2X. And then finally, we welcome everyone as certified ISS CMS partners. That's it. I want to thank you for your time this evening, and now I'll open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sequino, for your valuable presentation. So now we are going to have a Q&A session with you. We have received a total of 2 questions for you. So the first question is, in terms of the privacy policy, so please tell me, how do you manage autonomous driving vehicles collect private information?
That's a very good question, and I'm not sure I have all the answers for that, but certainly the devices themselves will have identities, and those identities will need to be managed and encrypted and ensured that they're trackable in case there is misbehavior. So I'm not sure in the case of autonomous vehicles, it's so much about privacy, but it's about auditing and tracking.
Okay, now let's move to the second question. The second question is, you've said that the result of the U.S. presidential election could affect the position of FCC about the 5.9 gigahertz bandwidth. So could you tell me the reasons for that?
Well, so this is it's a complicated question, and I'll give you my opinion, and I'll give you some history. The V2X standard and the collision avoidance metrics partnership was driven by a partnership with the US DOT when the last administration was in office. That was a Democratic administration. They were driving the standard to ensure that all vehicles were enabled with V2X. And back in 2016, that administration left office, and we had a new administration which had a stronger view that less regulations were more important. So they did not kill the rulemaking to ensure that everyone had to abide by the V2X rules, but they didn't move it forward aggressively. So now we're in a situation 4 years later where we might have a change of administration again. That could stick with the current administration, which means that it'll be a more passive approach, if you will, to the standard, or we could move back to a Democratic administration that defined the standard back in 2015 and 2014, which will likely drive the standard forward again. But again, this is all speculation. And please don't hold me to my words. This is, as I said, it's a highly contested election, and we'll find out probably on sometime over the next several weeks, I suspect.
Okay, thank you for your answers. Well, Mr. Conley, we'll look forward to having you in person to talk about this issue more in the near future. Once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. 네, 여러분, 이것으로 저희
This concludes the part 1 of the CITS 2020. We're gonna have the lunch break and come back at 1 o'clock Korean time. Bon appetit, please enjoy your lunch.
네, 여러분, 점심 식사는 다들 맛있게 드셨나요?
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope all of you enjoy your lunch. We are going to begin the afternoon session of CITS. The afternoon session consists of variable lectures, so I hope all of you stay tuned till the end of today's seminar. Let me invite the first speaker of the afternoon session. He is Professor Hagwon-soo from Hanyang University, and he will be talking about the key technologies and commercialization of autonomous vehicle. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to speak about key technologies and commercialization of autonomous vehicles. As introduced, my name is Hagwon-soo. I'm from the Automotive Engineering Department at Hanyang University. Before I start talking on autonomous vehicles' key technologies, I will briefly touch upon the necessity of autonomous vehicles. Then I will go on to talk about key technologies and safety, the direction of its commercialization, and finally the business models of autonomous vehicle technologies. The biggest reason why we need autonomous vehicles, as indicated in the media coverage, is the increasing desire for safety. As shown in many research papers, most car accidents occur due to the mistakes that human drivers make. Therefore, it is hoped that the adoption of the ADAS function or the advanced driver assist system or autonomous driving will reduce car accident. Especially in Korea, the aging population means that there will be more elderly drivers on the road, which will contribute to the increasing number of car accidents, which is true. And it's the same in case of the US and Japan, with the latter reporting up to more than half of all deaths resulting from car accidents, and they are due to more than half of them are due to elderly drivers' mistake in driving. And the second reason that autonomous vehicles is necessary is future mobility. Not long ago, in 2017, it was reported in the US that the future mobility will create a global market as big as $7 trillion by 2050, with the autonomous vehicle at its center. What is highlighted in dark blue represents business generated by autonomous vehicles, which will free drivers from driving the car. As you see here, there is a huge potential for services and business opportunities. Here shown in light blue, with the transportation and freight delivery becoming more autonomous, drivers will be able to enjoy different services, which can definitely provide business opportunities for the future. Third, in the hotel, dining, and travel businesses or tourism businesses, if autonomous vehicles are used, countless new business opportunities will pop up. What is interesting is that it was reported in the US that about 250 million hours of commuting can be saved when autonomous vehicles are adopted. This too is sure to present more business opportunities. An interesting report comes from Deutsche Bank saying that the current mobility services like Uber and Lyft cost about $2.5 per mile, but an autonomous vehicle will bring it down to $1.5 per mile, making car sharing more attractive to customers. Columbia University presents an even more aggressive estimate, predicting that ride cost could fall down to as low as $0.25 per mile. GM sells their car at the price of around $40,000. If they use their car's autonomous vehicle for ride sharing, charging $1 per mile, they can make $200,000 until the car has to be put out of service, which is 5 times the profit they can make by selling the car outright. In Europe, Volkswagen and Mobileye have partnered with the Israel company named Champion Motors to start an autonomous vehicle business, expecting it to become a huge business. Mainly fueled by these necessities, there have been vigorous researches underway on autonomous vehicles. The aforementioned ADAS may be equivalent to level 1 and 2 as shown here, and level 3 and 4 or 5 bring vehicles closer to total autonomy. At level 5, all the rider has to do is just selecting a destination. After this, drivers can sit back and relax, which is the final level of development of autonomous vehicles. Let me briefly explain the technologies required for autonomous vehicles at level 3 or above. First, we need a precise digital map, including all the roads that we will use. Also, a precise positioning and localization technology is required so that it can judge whether GPS information actually matches my current location, which is indicated on the digital map. In addition, a global path planning system that will determine how I can get from point A to B will be needed, as well as perception technology that can tell whether there are other cars or obstacles in front of me on my path. A 360-degree perception would allow my car to determine whether there are cars to my sides or my back, too. Through the use of such technology, my autonomous vehicle may avoid other vehicles in my pathway, changing lanes through the local path planning system. To summarize, as seen on the screen, level 1 and 2 are already in use today. Sensors can detect vehicles or obstacles in front of me, and then car lane sensors are mounted on the vehicles to control path planning in a fail-safe approach. Once all the devices are successfully installed in working order, level 3 or higher autonomous vehicles can be realized. But as you are aware, this is not an easy task. As long as we have 10 technology installed, and if they are in operation without any failure, we will have a fully autonomous vehicle, but we have a long way to go as of today. Currently, out of all the places in the world that conduct pilot operation of level 3 and 4 autonomous vehicles, only one place reports a safe operation of these vehicles. That is California. Last year, 62 companies in California received licenses for pilot operation, and of which 36 companies submitted disengaged report. This engagement refers to the situation where a driver has to take over control of the vehicle. Different companies have different definitions of disengagement, but it usually means that a driver needs to step on the brake, otherwise there would have been an accident. So as you see here, this engagement is equivalent to the number of accidents. So let's assume that one case of disengagement is one case of accident. This graph shows you the number of disengagement per company, such as Google, GM Cruise, Baidu. And Google has led the industry for a few years. But last year, Baidu reported that their 4 autonomous vehicles only had 0.05 disengagement per 1,000 miles. What does this number mean? This means that around 1 disengagement for every 20,000 miles, and that would amount to around 1 traffic accident to 20,000 miles. Then, what is the per 1,000-mile accident rate for the vehicles driven by humans? We believe that autonomous vehicles should be safer than human driving cars. In the case of US, about 1 traffic accident death occurs for every 100 million miles, and 1 traffic accident per 400 or 500,000 miles. Sorry that we have a much less database in Korea. Earlier, I said that level 5 and 4 Baidu autonomous vehicles had 1 disengagement per 20,000 miles. This means that cars driven by humans are around 20 times more safer than autonomous vehicles as of today. What does the number mean? It means that creating autonomous vehicles that are safer than humans, human-driven cars, is not easy. Recently, another interesting report came out. An analysis of 5,000 recent year traffic accidents by IISH in the US show that traffic accident can fully avoided by autonomous vehicles. I mean, that's only 1/3 of all accidents that we have, which means that other 2/3 of the accident cannot be fully avoided, even by autonomous vehicle. And according to Toyota's estimate, even if all vehicles on the road have active safety system which prevent car lane deviation or collision, only about 2/3 of the accident can be avoided or prevented. So, although there are many people who suggest that full autonomous vehicle deployment will lead to a traffic accident-free world, this assertion needs to be taken with a grain of salt. Although we expect mass commercialization of autonomous vehicles, the reality is that we have a long way to go. The following 2018 report is a forecast of those sectors where autonomous vehicles most likely to be adopted. First sector includes commercial trucks, buses, and shuttle buses that are run by ride-hailing, ride-sharing, and car-sharing companies or platforms, as well as the recently emerging delivery vehicles. This report expects only a small percentage of the private cars to adopt autonomous driving in the near future. The global trend of autonomous vehicle commercial application is as follows. There is much research going on this subject in Korea, but the primary sector for autonomous vehicle application is the commercial vehicle sector. U.S. covers a huge landmass, so the autonomous vehicle used in cargo trucks has much potential. And there is much interest in autonomous buses in the U.S., Japan, and China. As you might be aware, 5 to 10-seater shuttle buses run at low speed, and many of these autonomous buses are in operation overseas. In Korea, autonomous shuttle buses such as Jiro Shuttle and with us are running pilot operation project. Next sector is robotaxi. Waymo updates us on their progress through press releases, and they are in service in California and Arizona, mainly for taxi services. Over the recent couple of years, China has also aggressively pursued the robotaxi market, running pilot programs in several regions. Recently, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there is an increasing emphasis put on contactless interactions, including deliveries. The delivery sector, the vehicles running in delivery sector has drawn a lot of attention in the US and China. As I have explained, in order for level 3 or better autonomous vehicles to become commercialized, many technological breakthroughs must take place. This is because even level 4 and 5 autonomous vehicles have yet to prove themselves safe enough for passengers' satisfaction. So currently, the industry is focused on buses and trucks that can have large-scale commercial applications right away. As for the commercialization of autonomous vehicles, robotaxis are eligible for some central or local government funding support, so they are receiving some spotlight. From the perspective of autonomous vehicle R&D companies, however, there are many business models that can be pursued even before the autonomous vehicle commercialization of level 4 or 5. So I've made a list of the 10 or so research areas here. These have applications in the level 2 autonomous vehicle market as well. Even before the level 4 and 5 autonomous vehicle comes out into the market, the level 2 technologies can be utilized in the level 2 vehicles, and it can create advanced business models on their own. This is why much research efforts have been made in this field. It seems large companies, semiconductor manufacturers, software, and Tier 1 car makers are not only looking to perfect their level 4 and 5 autonomous vehicle, they are rather focused on the idea of integrating the various advanced level 2 technologies to advance level 2 autonomous vehicles. Therefore, the issue is cost versus performance. Even though only a small part of the driving is automated, A large number of business models can be created at level 2. So it is important to note that software can be constantly upgraded, whereas hardware is less flexible. So the hardware makes relatively slow advances. Recent trends indicate that Tier 1 car manufacturers or IT software service providers are mounting application software platforms onto hardware to create a wide range of Level 2 autonomous vehicle business models. Here is the list of the leading softwares, but recently Waymo and Google have been receiving the limelight. The software platforms are not only making use of existing application software, but also expanded their field to create alternative AI technologies for autonomous vehicles and support software security. Semiconductor companies are also entering this market since they have core technologies. And also we can expect to see software platforms such as Google's Android Automotive, Apple's CarPlay, and Linux and other platforms unique to car manufacturers will emerge. There is a growing interest in software since, as it is well known, autonomous vehicles require a huge volume of software. So we cannot wait and see who will become the front runner in this industry. In case of hardware, researchers are underway as to the various sensor modules to be mounted on the vehicle. Most notably, Waymo announced this year a new business model, the Waymo Driver. This business model can be used in cars, minivans, and large vans and trucks. It proposes quite a grand idea that once Waymo's sensor modules and software installations are made available and get ready, the company will install sensors and software platforms to turn the vehicle into autonomous one right away. It's a very strong business model that they are pursuing. And Waymo is also preparing for different business models in addition to this one. In conclusion, commercialization of Level 3 autonomous vehicle will not be easy. However, we have many different business models for key technologies. And even though Level 3 autonomous vehicle will not be commercialized immediately or shortly, there are big potential in terms of commercial applications of the core key technologies. And it can lead to diverse business models. And this concludes my presentation, and thank you for listening.
네, 발표해 주신 허건수 교수님 다시 한번
Thank you so much for your
그럼 저희가 다
wonderful
Q&A
presentation.
진행을 위해서
Let's move on to have a
화상으로
Q&A.
교수님을 만나보도록
So
하겠습니다.
shall we connect?
교수님,
Shall we
잘
invite
들리시나요?
Professor He online? Can you hear me?
교수님 들리시나요?
Do you hear me?
네, 안녕하세요. 허건수입니다.
Hi.
잘 들립니다. 네.
I can hear
교수님
you.
이렇게 만나 뵙게 돼서 진심으로
Thank you.
반갑습니다.
Very good to see you.
강연 잘 들었고요.
Thank you for your
지금
wonderful
제게
presentation.
교수님께 드리는 두 가지
We have two
질문이
questions.
제출돼 있는데요. 첫 번째
Let me
질문
ask you a
먼저
first question.
읽어보도록 하겠습니다. 우선 자율주행을 보다 빨리
For
구현하기
the
위해서
realization
10가지
of
기술을
self-driving
언급해 주셨습니다.
vehicle, you talked
그중에서
about the top 10
선행되어야 하는
technologies.
기술은 무엇일까요?
Which one is the
아니면
most
중요도가
important
높은
technology to
기술은
proceed?
무엇이라고 생각하십니까?
But which one needs to be given priority?
사실 뭐 제가 이제 꼭 10개라고 쓰긴 했지만
Even though I said
그 기술들이
10
모두
specifically,
중요하고요. 또 그중에 특별히 뭐가 더
I believe that all of them
선행되어야 한다라고
are
말하기 쉽지
important.
않습니다.
They should be given priority, all of them.
자율주행이 되려면
It's hard to
모든
pick one
기술들이 다
because we need to have
이것도 시스템적으로 잘 구현이 되어야 되거든요. 그래서
10 technologies
기술들이
in place in order to have autonomous vehicle
적절하게
in
이제
place.
많이 내려와야 되고
The prices should come down to the reasonable level, and then they should provide reliable services as well. So let me add just one comment. As for the technologies,
아마 글로벌 글로벌 수백 개 회사들이 있을
We
겁니다.
have
그 회사들이
maybe hundreds of companies who develop
성공하기
those
위해서
technologies.
엄청나게 많은 돈을
They are
투자하고
making a
시간을
huge investment and
많은
making
투자에
efforts in
들어가는
order to
부분이 있는데요.
commercialize those
이게 이제
technologies.
레벨 제가 이제 발표 중에도 말씀드렸지만
As I said
레벨
during
3
my
이상이
presentation,
상용화가 안 되더라도
even
레벨 2
before level
자율주행에
3 and
적용을
level
쉽게 되는
4,
기술들이
there
중요하다고
are
볼 수
certain
있죠.
technologies
레벨
that
2
can be
자율주행에
utilized at level 2. They are quite
또 안에 레벨
important.
2가 만들어지면서 거기서부터
So
비즈니스 모델이
those
나오고
technologies that are applied to
그런
level
기술들
2,
예를 들면 뭐 제가
they can be
말씀드린 것 중에
used
360도
and can be
퍼셉션
created
센서라든지
for
뭐 AR
different business models,
뭐
360 perception model,
통신 이런
and
것들은 아마
V2X communication tools and technologies.
적용이 되면서
They are the ones that need
좀
to be
많은
used
비즈니스
in level
모델이
2
만들어질 거라
vehicles.
예상이 되니까요.
And I
그런
believe that we
기술들이
can have different
비즈니스
business
모델 관점에서
models by
보면
combining those technologies. So they are the ones of great importance to us. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the second question, which is about the business model. For the self-driving car, it can reduce the number of car accidents, but not as much as the consumers want it to be. Then, what are the business models that they can attract consumers?
제가 사실 발표 중에 말씀을 드렸지만
I briefly mentioned in my presentation.
우리나라의 많은 사람들이
In Korea,
승용차에 완전 자율주행이 구현되는 비즈니스 모델을
they think of the business model that can be applied to the personal vehicles. But as I said, prior to the commercialization of autonomous vehicle in private sector or passenger cars, I believe that it will be used in the public vehicle system first. So if I may, I made one comment. For the public car or public transportation, every country has a different conditions or situation when it comes to the public transportation. So in Korea, I find it rather difficult for us to introduce autonomous driving to the public sector. So it's really hard to make a prediction on that topic. Thank you so much for answering those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's move on to the next speaker. Next speaker is Professor Kim Si-ho from Yonsei University. Professor Kim is going to tell us about the connected car using the blockchain technology. Let's meet him with his video clip. I am Kim Si-ho, professor at Yonsei University. Today I'll be speaking on the subject of the blockchain technology, which is used for the connected car. So, blockchain, except for the researchers, is not a very well understood idea. So, to give a short and effective explanation of blockchain is not an easy task. The outline of today's talk is on the screen. This is how today's talk will be given. Let's look at the outline. First, in the introduction, I will give a brief overview about today's talk, then shortly introduce the idea of the connected vehicle, then we'll go on to briefly cover the vehicle cloud and the V2X. Then we'll look into the blockchain technology, what it is, and how it works. I will keep it brief and easy to understand. Then I will explain the use of the blockchain in the connected vehicle, its use cases and applications. First of all, let's look at the blockchain technology and its background. What constitutes vehicular communication and the connected vehicles network, which can be divided into three network components. First, we have the vehicle-to-vehicle, vehicle-to-infrastructure, and vehicle-to-person communications. This sort of communication that occurs between the structurally parallel entities, which are equal within the system, are the coordinate link. B2V, B2I, B2B, these are the direct communication. It is a network that can work independently from the cellular network. Second is the communication that goes through a base transceiver network and is accessed through the internet. Thus is called up-down link. In this case, a vehicle cloud is created and the vehicles are connected through the internet. This is referred to as a connected vehicle. Then, the third network, the connected vehicles, as we saw before, requires a network within the vehicle itself. The in-vehicle network is required for the side network. The side network communicates through VANet, which is the vehicular add-on network. So DSRT, CVTX, etc. are part of the VANet protocol. The in-vehicle network would support this, and in order to access to the internet, LTE, 5G, or Wi-Fi will be used to have access to the vehicle cloud. These kind of network support, as well as the IVN network, make up the complex communication network. Connected vehicles have a complex network built into them, so it is a target for hackers. Hacking this network will have a great impact, so cybersecurity is becoming a very important issue for the connected vehicles. Determining what kinds of attacks can be made against the connected vehicles, we refer to this as an attack surface. When we look at the potential attack, there can be the attack on the VANet. Attacks can occur when the fraudulent data is entered into the VANet or otherwise tampered with through the falsification or forgery. Also, attacks can go through the vehicle cloud, the internet, in the form of the malicious code, such as virus or ransomware. Another form of attack can be directed against the sensors. Connected vehicles are intelligent, so there are many sensors, such as cameras. Passive attacks against the sensors, which can lead them to make false readings, can be possible. So, a defense system has been created to stop these attacks. We will look at the taxonomy of these systems. The traditional defense method rages on a centralized authority, which is managed by the main administrator. Thus, defense solution can be assorted into preventive, active, and passive defense. Preventive defense refers to blocking attacks before they take shape. These include in-vehicle device authentication, user authentication, digital signature, and certificate, firewall, and secure communications. These measures are familiar to use because they are similar to that of a PC or mobile smartphones for the defense measures. In the case of the active defense, it means there is a continuous monitoring of the system to fend off the attacks. Passive defense is made up of elements such as detection, response, and recovery. This intrusion detection system finds whether there have been system breaches. There is the malware detection, isolation, which keeps the system isolated and restoring the functions after a virus check, which, for example, may be installed on the PCs or mobile phones. So then, can connected vehicle security issues be addressed through this method or not? We can think of it this way. As shown in the picture, centralized authority faces the challenge of encryption, and another challenge is decryption. That is, it depends on the cryptographic system, such as firewalls, as described before. In this case, V2V, V2I, vehicle to network, or the internet communications, which are created in a complex way, will face the trust issues. How can the incoming information that is coming in can be trusted? Data from sensors, for example. How can one be assured of their integrity, that their data were not falsified or tampered with? Also, in order to create the security, private data is necessarily exposed. For example, data about who the driver is, the vehicle's location at a particular time. Will people be able to accept this breach in privacy? The problems are cropping up. And how can we make it secure? This issue cannot be solved through the traditional security solution. That is why we are discussing blockchain technology to resolve this issue. If blockchains are implemented, information becomes decentralized, distributed, and even immutable, which means it cannot be altered or can be of proof of the access. It can be traceable and private. Each vehicle becomes a node for information and peers that constitute the blockchain. This network solves the problem that exists in the centralized authority system. This is called the blockchain-based ITS. Now, when the age of the intelligent connected vehicles arrive, there will be many new services that will become available. For example, services in traffic safety, remote care, mobile office, entertainment, self-driving car, autonomous taxi, car sharing, etc. And even the seat level, we can have the sharing, and the carpooling can occur as well. Also, there can be route optimization, which can enhance traffic efficiency. Such diverse services and apps will create an intelligent and connected vehicle system. And all of these are potential attack surfaces for the hackers. Next, when the vehicle cloud is established, new ecosystem will arise. The traditional vehicles manufacturer, use, sales, maintenance, insurance, used car sale, in-vehicle entertainment will all be connected by the cloud. The traditional vehicle manufacturers and the OEMs are attempting to create this new ecosystem. Recently, Tesla has been focused on making early initiatives in this field. Then, the manufacturing, dealing, maintenance, repairs, insurance, owning, maintenance of the connected between the vehicles, entertainment, internet network access, etc., can all be exposed to potential hacking attacks. So, then, let's look at how blockchain can provide a solution for fending against these attacks. Blockchain technology is the basic properties. it can prevent double spending. This means that, like when you are entering a number into an accounting ledger, when the numbers are entered twice into the accounting ledger, one must be careful not to enter the number twice for the same sales or the spending. And blockchain acts so that double spending becomes impossible. Next is security, which refers to the privacy and integrity of the data, which will be encrypted. Next, immutability is secured, which means that the record will be permanent. Once a ledger is created, an individual or the group cannot erase a certain piece of data. It is irreversible, which means the data, once entered, cannot be changed or denied. Tampering becomes impossible. Then comes auditability, which refers to the fact that accounting and the auditing becomes possible. The unadulterated data can be made available for audit. Traceability is similar to the auditability in that one can find out how and when a certain transaction took place throughout the history of the tracking. Next is the transparency. In the case of the public blockchain, the data is transparent because all the data are available to the public. In the case of the private or the permission to blockchain, entities within the network who have the proper authentications can access it. So, thus, is different from the public blockchain where all data is public record. Scalability refers to the fact that the system can be expanded. For example, it is different from saying that when a database comes to a memory capacity, it can continually generate data perpetually. So, these properties indicate that blockchains is at the heart of creating a new storage system with the new security measures. This application of blockchain technology in a certain system will have the following three properties. First, decentralization. This means the data will not be stored in a central system. A central administrator cannot manipulate the data. Since there is no central administrator, a hacker has no target. Just if there is a central administrator and they are hacked, the system is breached. However, since data is dispersed in the blockchain system, unless the hacker hacks all the users, it is impossible to breach the system. It may seem like a paradox, but the very fact that data is dispersed widely, its security is heightened. Next, collaborative development becomes possible. Through collaboration, the peers can share the task and attain the trust. It is a system of the trust that requires the contribution to that system. Next, it is programmable. The blockchain system is not fixed, and the users can create a system that suits their needs. Then let's briefly look at how blockchain is formed. There are 5 steps in the creation of the blockchain. First, when a certain transaction occurs, the user will digitally verify that the data using their given ID. This is called the hashing and the crypto stage. The user's ID is used to encrypt the data using a hash function. This data is disseminated among all the tier users. The tier nodes will then share the data. Since the data is encrypted and hashed, even if someone were to unpack a certain piece of the data won't show who it belongs to or what transaction occurred. So in this way, privacy is secured. When the data is disseminated from the nodes start the mining process. Why mining occurs? It has 2 reasons. First is to create a consensus. The data are sent to each node to be eventually created into a block. The block looks like this, but In the interest of saving time, I will skip over the structural details of a block. When a block is created, the nodes compete over who first creates the hash. That ensures the integrity of that block. So when a node wins that competition to find that hash data, that node is awarded with an incentive in the form of the crypto coin like Bitcoin or Ethereum. This process is called mining. Through this mining process, a node first finds the hash data. The other nodes verify the integrity of that hash data. When the integrity is confirmed, then the block has been fully created. This is called the creation of consensus. When over 51% of the nodes confirms the veracity of the hash data, the consensus is formed. In this way, a new block is created and new blocks continue to be turning out. Since the blocks are continuously created, the data within a certain block cannot be manipulated. The data, when integrated into a block, cannot be manipulated. This is because when a certain node tries to manipulate the data within a block, that block's relationship with the joining blocks will become corrupted. That is why, unless at least 51% of the node that verifies the block hash data simultaneously manipulate the data within a block, a single manipulation will stick out as the being erroneous. This is why a single hacker cannot hack into the block.
과정을 해서 그러면 이렇게 만들어진 각각의 이 피어들은 노드들을
So, the node is created
분산해서 저장할 수 있고요. 어떤
and a block is entered into the distributed ledger, making it part of the blockchain. So this process blockchain is created and distributed to the peers. The data can be distributed for storage, and if an individual may trace what the transactions were made in their ID, making an audit is possible.
시점력이라는 게 나왔습니다.
And now we have the blockchain 2.0. This is called smart contract. Smart contract uses Ethereum. So when we talk about the EVM, it is the Ethereum virtual machine. The apps that use EVM are the decentralized applications.
이렇게 동작하는 시스템을
Systems that operate as shown before are called the DAO, the Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. To briefly look into the DAO,
두 사용자 간에 스마트한
this is the process of creating a smart contract between two users.
하는 거래 성립 조건을 놓고요. 이
A
거래를
smart contract outlines the conditions required for a transaction.
상을 시스템에 하겠다.
Also, it specifies what compensations will be given when the contract conditions are met. The compensation requires are called GAS, gas limit, just as a car requires gas to operate. The gas limit indicates the compensation price selling of the accomplishing a task. So this becomes an executable code or the bytecode. This bytecode is inserted and saved into each peer's blockchain. When the correct conditions are met, the bytecode is executed. Let me tell you a little bit more about this. The traditional contract consists of the two people meeting, drawing up a contract, then getting that contract notarized by a trusted third party, just as we do so in the real estate deals or the creating a bank account. A third party needs to guarantee the agreement or have it notarized. So this was the traditional contract, but in the case of the smart contract, the two parties create a contract that
각 피어에 저장을 해요.
and the conditions for the contract are saved on the peer network. The transaction requirements are drawn up, and when the conditions are met, the bytecode is automatically executed. So this process of the contract and the transactions are saved on the blockchain. Therefore, the smart contract system contains of the blockchain properties which make it irreversible, immutable, and traceable. The system is called decentralized autonomous organization. So, if We apply the blockchain to the ITS, the vehicle-to-vehicle communication, and the link to the nodes. The blockchain-based ITS is formed. Each vehicle and network becomes a network peer that holds data independently, and each peer holds their own distributed ledger.
분산된 ledger가 저장되는 이런 시스템을 우리가 생각을 하면 되겠습니다. 그래서 블록체인의 이런
The properties of the blockchains are applied, therefore, to the system.
자, 그러면은
So then,
블록체인을 이제
let's look at some use cases of the blockchain-based applications. There are quite a lot of cases,
수십 가지
many dozens of the application cases, but we will go over just a few cases today.
먼저 이 이제
First, the
여기
cases in the reference 3 and 4 were mostly created and are being developed by Toyota Motors.
드라이빙 테스팅 데이터 쉐어
They have created driving and testing data sharing, for instance. Thus is an invaluable resources for us. When a vehicle gathers data and needs to share it,
서로 공유를 하는데 그 계절링된 데이터
verifying the data's
어떤 데이터 인티그리티
integrity can be done through a blockchain-based application.
그다음에 카쉐어링
Also, car and ride-sharing transactions guarantees can be secured throughout the blockchain-based systems.
이제 차를 공유를 해요.
Guarantees can be created for the car sharing. For example, agreements can be made to guarantee a driver's arrival time,
정말 나의 약속된 시간
whether the driver is not making any false representations, whether a
성추행
rider is a sex offender or a criminal.
할 수가 없죠. 그래서 차량 공유를 그런 차량
In any of these,
활성화될 수가 없는 거죠. 그런 거를 블록체인을 이용해서
riding sharing platform
이게 이제 도요타에서
should do some kind of the verification. This is what Toyota team has been working on. And the next one is the usage-based insurance. For instance, if a company is applying a certain rate to a vehicle with a certain mileage, there needs to be trusted source that can guarantee a car's mileage. Blockchain can provide that veracity automatically.
그다음에 이런
So till now, we were looking at a specific apps. In the case of the vehicle security platform, there is over-the-air software update or the content exchange, which requires real-time verification
실시간 보증이
of the integrity of the data of the vehicle. Blockchain can be applied here. Also, blockchain can be used in the case of intelligent vehicle communication for security and for verifying the integrity. Also, blockchain can be used for the event or the accident when an event such as an accident occurs, particularly a car has been involved in when buying or selling used cars.
지금은 어디 가서 확인하지? 중고차
Traditionally, the only source of the verification was to trust the sellers or checking the insurance company for the information. If, however, the car is integrated into a blockchain network, the vehicle's events are recorded, so it is impossible to deny that the vehicle was involved in a car accident or not. Through these kind of the platform, the application of the blockchain can be endless. This is from a paper I wrote about 2 years ago. It is an example of the services about blockchain applications in the autonomous cars.
한 적이 있습니다. 우리 이 신호등이 없는
An issue can rise at the crossroads without the stress signals operating on the first-come, first-go protocol.
이렇게 이제 운영이 되죠. 그러면은 이 자율주행
It is necessary to answer the question of which vehicle arrived first at the stop sign
어떻게 보장?
when autonomous vehicles lined up at the intersections. When those vehicles arrive, thus, however, it creates a deadlock because the vehicles cannot figure out which has the right of the way since there are no street signals.
자율주행체 하나의 모순이라고 하는 이런 데드락이 발생하는데 이걸 블록체인을
When this problem is created, using the blockchain trust network to ascertain the timestamp of arrival can be the key to solving the
각각의 이
problem.
데이터를 신뢰하는 거죠.
Since blockchain data can be trusted, and it should be trusted.
데드락 문제 발생하지 않고 신호등 없는 이 우선순위 교차로에서 퍼스트 컴 퍼스트 서브 autonomous vehicle 운행이
So the first come, first serve autonomous vehicle service can be possible. So as we can see, there can be untold numbers of these service applications.
짧은 시간이라서 뭐 굉장히 전달할 메시지
Our lecture was limited, so I was not able to deliver everything that I prepared. Let me briefly summarize what I just told you. We touched upon the connected cars, reviewed the concept of the blockchain technology and blockchain-based connected car applications.
그다음에 블록체인이라고 하는 게
Also, since blockchain is so-called destructive emerging technology of the fourth industrial revolution, it may have a great impact on our life.
그래서 이것이
It can be applied to the ITS by guaranteeing transparency, immutability, traceability, and efficiency.
efficiency를 보장해 주는
So it has
굉장한
much potential.
기회를 가지고 있다는 것을 말씀드릴 수 있겠습니다. 그다음에
Also, blockchain technology has application in cybersecurity, as it has the potential to guarantee it through the decentralized system.
보장하는 방안을 마련할 수 있다는 것이고요. 그렇지만 아직
However, there are many issues that needs to be solved to apply this to the real world.
많이 남아 있다. 이렇게 정리를 하고
So that was a brief summary, and I will stop here. There are a few more materials. I was not able to cover that in the interest of time. This is just for your reference. And if you have any questions, probably I may refer to these materials. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
네, 김시호 교수님 발표 감사드립니다.
Professor Kim, thank you very much.
교수님을 화상으로 연결해서
And let's meet him online for the Q&A session.
네, 강연 잘 들었습니다. 그럼 바로 Q&A를 진행하도록 하겠습니다.
Let's move on to the Q&A. And we have a few questions.
블록체인 기술은 보안에 취약점이 없는
Blockchain technology is a perfect technology that does not have any security vulnerability. There is no perfect technology.
근데 그
But
비트코인인 경우에는 아직까지
in the case of the Bitcoin, there has been lots of the hacking attempts. However, it has never been hacked yet. And Bitcoin has never been hacked yet. In the case of the Bitcoin 2.0 smart contract has been hacked.
스마트 컨트랙이 아직
So
적용되지 않는 거는 보안 취약
smart contract has the security vulnerability. That is why it is not applied to the real life.
노출돼 있다. 이렇게 볼 수
Currently, it has some vulnerability,
여러 가지 아이디어들이 추가되고
and there are many ideas being added to prevent that kind of a hacking attack for the smart contract. Let me move on to the second question. Blockchain technology is the decentralized technology according to what you say because there is no central administrator. It is distributed. There are so many data points, so the security level will go up. However, if a hacker is just targeting a single vehicle, in that case,
블록체인으로 방어가 가능.
the hacking can be blocked or prevented based on the blockchain technology. There can be various scenarios possible. However, if,
어느 것도 자기가 중앙이 아니기 때문에
as you know, each node is independent. If one or two nodes are hacked and under the control of the hacker, the system as a whole is not exposed to the security vulnerability, even though you are losing one or soldiers as a POW, but you will not lose at the war as a nation or as a country. So,
공격을 하다
as a hacker,
자기가 노출되고
and he will expose himself when he is doing the attack.
안 하겠죠.
And the hackers will not do any attack. That does not give him any tangible benefit,
굉장히 안전해지는
which means each node will become safer. If there is an attack to a certain node, and then if the security structure can be collapsed, yes, you may attack. However, even though you attack a certain node, the overall security level will not collapse. There is no gain or no benefit to the hacker. Once again, a collapse of the single node will not destroy the whole system. Of course, a single node can be collapsed.
알고 싶게 답변해 주셔서 감사드립니다.
Thank you very much for the answer. Let's move on to the next question.
현실에 적용하는
You said that there are some homework we need to do to apply the blockchain to the reality. And what are those homeworks? The first biggest challenge is people need to understand about the blockchain. People come to know about the blockchain thanks to the cryptocurrency, so people have negative perspectives about the blockchain. The government policy is focusing on the restriction. So, again, the blockchain technology needs to be objectively understood. We need to build a consensus process within the society. And we can have the ITS system using the blockchain. Just like you are using the smartphone, if you are using the Samsung, you get into the Samsung cloud. If you are using the iPhone, you get into the Apple cloud. Each of the company are providing their own cloud service. If we have the autonomous vehicle and the connected cars, the service providers will have their cloud system on their own. The OEMs will have their own cloud system, and we can probably use the blockchain on their own ecosystem. However, the technology is not applied to the practice yet, so we are waiting for the choice for the future. We have the last question. And do you think that the blockchain can replace the needs for the SCMS? It is not replacing the SCMS. It is a different methodology. SCMS is the Security Credential Management System, and SCMS is taking care of the security for each of the node. And however, that is centralized. For example, in the case of the bank, and you need to get the public key, and the centralized agency is issuing the public key or the certificate to you. And if the trusted party is hacked, the total system will be collapsed. However, blockchain is doing the same, however, with the decentralized system, not the centralized system. Nobody is having decentralized power, which means blockchain is not replacing the SCMS. It's more like a decentralized SCMS. SCMS itself can be running on the blockchain. Only the methodology or the approach changes. The role itself, the what does not change, how is changing. There were many questions. Thank you very much for the kind answer. Thank you very much, Professor. Okay, this concludes the session, and we can have a short break, and we are going to resume the session starting from the 2:15. Let's have a coffee break, and I will resume the session at 15 past 2.
We are having a number of experts together at this seminar, and I believe that you will be able to get insight from the presentations that we are having today. Let me introduce next speaker. This presentation will be made by Dr. An from 3M Korea, and the title is Connective Roads for Autonomous Vehicles. Good afternoon. My name is An Hyo-seok of 3M Transportation Safety Division. I will make a presentation on connected roads for autonomous vehicle at this conference. Over a long period of time, we at the 3M Transportation Safety Division have made a contribution to the traffic safety. Let's first watch a video which explains road infrastructure traffic safety.
There are over 1.2 billion cars on our roadways today. Soon, many of them will be automated, a change that could result in the 80 to 90% of crashes caused by human error being reduced or even eliminated. At 3M, we believe the present and future of roadways are connected. That's because many of the 3M technologies that drivers have relied on for years to help them safely navigate the road are the same ones that can help guide the sensors and machine vision technologies on driver-assisted cars available today, and even the automated connected vehicles of tomorrow. Infrastructure enhanced with quality, cost-effective 3M materials results in simplicity and redundancy. That means safer drivers, passengers, and pedestrians. And smoother, more efficient transportation. At 3M, tomorrow is today. See how we're helping support the safer, more connected roads of the future at 3m.com/connectedroads.
저희 3M Connected Road, our 3M Connected Road uses unique technology consisting of wet lanes and pavement markings that are machine readable, as well as the signs, traffic control devices, work zone, and road information systems that can be read by sensors. It is to help build authentic connected road. With 80 years of technological innovation, visibility of pavement markings and signs is guaranteed, even at night, in rain, at dawn, or dusk. This must be guaranteed on the autonomous driving road environment as well. Therefore, road safety should be guaranteed with the lanes visible in any climate conditions. And reflective film signs are made of materials that are made machine readable on the connected road, and it can eliminate 80 to 90% of traffic accidents caused by human error, reduce delays by 95% by improving the flow at intersections. It allows us to save about $2,000 a year per automated vehicle. First, let me talk about the lane markings optimized for machine perception. Connected road pavement markings are designed for both human and machine vision. It is same for the lane guidance systems such as ADAS. 3M has developed new pavement marking solutions to meet the needs of both human drivers and machine vision systems. There are three characteristics of pavement markings for optimal detection by current ADAS. First, higher luminance, which uses more light to each pixel to camera to enhance detection. High contrast, it improves differentiation between markings and pavement, so it detects marking by camera much better. Wet retroflective markings, it can improve light returning to the camera in nighttime, and low light wet conditions, it can improve detection of the pavement marking. In the end, 3M Connected Road all-weather elements, a road marking commonly used in Korea, has the next generation of performance. Compared to other products that we have, it has a sustained durability and better or increased brightness. Also, retroreflection is absolutely required in both wet and dry conditions. Connected Road Contrast Tape 380 ADAS means more light is available for each pixel in the camera, allowing detection with higher luminance in all lighting conditions. High contrast in all lighting conditions improves the distinction between pavement marking and pavement materials. It also improves the detection of pavement markings by cameras. By the year 2023, 71% of all new cars in key regions will have LDW adopted. However, existing challenges with LDW-KRA prevent us from achieving the full safety potential of the lane assist system. Here are the current and projected penetration of each function for vehicles in autonomous ADAS application and associated sensors. LDW penetration for new cars is forecasted to increase from 50 to 71%, and TSR from 15 to 30%, and autopilot from 5 to 12%. As a consequence, because every sensor brings different benefits, sensors are used to complement each other through sensor fusion. Therefore, the safety device penetration rate of the new vehicle is important, but it is required to build connected road. considering the penetration rate of vehicles. In summary, pavement markings for autonomous driving road infrastructure are called a connected road pavement marking solution. To understand the value proposition of this, you need to understand the machine vision system. In this regard, 3M Connected Road has also launched and owns two new pavement marking solutions designed for human vision and machine vision systems. Next, I will talk about traffic signs optimized for camera readability and connectivity on connected road. Traffic signs for autonomous driving road infrastructure have a structure in which the perspective of person and vehicle are displayed at the same time. When driverless cars meet unfinished road, a dangerous situation arises, like going into the uncharted territory. Therefore, DOT of Michigan is experimenting on these connected road traffic signs across the 17 miles. When viewed by humans, it is recognized as a conventional traffic sign. However, when read by machine, traffic sign information embedded in the reflective film applied to the sign is acquired. This is quite similar to the QR code. Let's look at the 40-second video about the principle of a connected road traffic sign, which is in pilot operation in Michigan, USA. Such autonomous driving road infrastructure traffic signs are utilized to realize innovation towards zero fatalities. Efforts are made to enhance the camera vision system to recognize messages that cannot be read by human eyes. Also, enhancing the camera system performance capable of operating in poor conditions. It's quite important. On the other hand, if road infrastructure uses traffic safety facilities linked to the autonomous vehicles, it can acquire traffic safety information even in environments that cannot be seen with naked eyes. This kind of safety road infrastructure should be achieved and built at the national level. Europe has a consortium under the name of Sea Road. The Connected Road team is selectively engaged in the corridors for pavement markings and signs. In Korea, we have a recent autonomous driving road infrastructure activity underway, which is called a project at K-City. K-City is a test bed for self-driving vehicles. Its purpose is to support technology development and verify safety of self-driving cars. It's the largest testbed for autonomous car R&D in the world and 3 times larger than MCT, Michigan University in the U.S. The pilot city was completed by the end of 2018. It's located at the ITS track inside the Proving Ground of Korea Automobile Testing and Research Institute. KCT installed high luminance signs and ultra-high luminance signs according to the grade reflective sheet for signs on autonomous driving road infrastructure. Pavement markings apply to compare and analyze lanes. In other countries, ADAS capability research was conducted at the University AWC of Dresden. In the first field of autonomous driving, 13 related organizations and companies cooperated to mount equipment and conduct a test. A comparison of A380 ADAS and standard sprayed pavement markings were compared. Despite high filters, high luminance refractive pavement marking was detected. On the other hand, other pavement markings disappear from the vision. Let's continue with the comparison. A380 ADAS and standard system or markings. Excellent retroreflection results were confirmed through the LiDAR system. A380AW with reflective in a very wet condition will not be made invisible even from the detection area, no matter what the conditions are. Professor Trotman presented as follows. In conjunction with an optimized LiDAR sensor, 3M's new reflective lane marking enables a stable and reliable detection of lane information. This is an important prerequisite for highly and fully automated vehicles. Last but not the least, I'm going to show you pedestrian safety solution in a short video clip. As you see here, you can detect a pedestrian who is in the blind spot, who is waiting in front of a crosswalk. The VDS display notifies the vehicle of any dangers or risks. Whenever there is a pedestrian, it informs the vehicle of the possibility of a collision. Let's have a look at the demonstration video. You have a pictogram in the video clip. Let's have a look at this stereo camera video clip. In the detection area, you can see a person is detected, and in other case, it is not. Once a pedestrian is detected, there is a caution sign appears or pictogram is displayed. This safety solution is a device that can notify the driver of any danger risk information. So it is being applied as a smart road and pedestrian safety service in a smart city. In particular, since information can be provided to devices mounted on autonomous vehicles, it is well used, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your presentation. And let's move on to the Q&A. Dr. An, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to ask you some questions. First question. As for the contrast tape, what about the durability? It may be damaged by the tire, or it may wear over time. As for the SATME 1710 is used to measure the durability. After we install it, we guarantee the performance for 4 years. So 4-year guarantee is applied when it's used on the pavement. And then, in general, in Korea, as for the other paint, once you use like 6 months, you cannot guarantee its performance. So compared to that, our durability is much better. Let me ask you the second question. As for the pavement markings, do you believe that we need to standardize the QR code? Smart code, if it's standardized, that will be even better. But at the national level, we have different conditions in each country, and we apply different conditions by different countries, which means that it's going to take a long time for us to have a standardized QR code. So when you use a QR at the national level or organization level, you have to offer a open protocol so that we can have a better utilization. Last question, tape and markings and signs. And do you also develop any other infra product? As for the pavement markings, we want to have a sensor built into the system so that it can be detected when it's covered with the snow. So in the end, we are trying to develop a markings that can be detected in any weather conditions. I see. Thank you so much. Let me give you housekeeping announcement. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A box. Thank you. This brings us to the end of your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Without further ado, I would like to invite the next speaker. We have Professor Kim Yong-dae from KAIST. He's going to tell us about the autonomous driving with cybersecurity. Hello, my name is Kim Yong-dae, and I'm at KAIST. I will give a short lecture on the autonomous vehicle and security today. You've heard many lectures today. I think it would be good to go over what differences are between human-driven vehicles and an autonomous vehicle. If we remove the human from the human-driven car, there will be a lot we would have to replace. First, we would need to replace the human eyes. I will call this as detection and recognition. Second, we would need to replace the human brain. I will call this the artificial intelligence or the autonomous intelligence. Third, humans talk with each other, or there is a communication between the navigation system and the humans, or vehicles communicating with other vehicles. I will call this the human-to-machine interface. While in the past, automobile was merely a machine. However, the autonomous vehicle can be seen as a large computer. I will call this as the embedded system. These four large changes in creating autonomous vehicles, therefore, are the detection and recognition, the autonomous driving capability, human-machine interface, and the embedded system. They all each have security issues. In today's lecture, I will go over what issues are, and I would like to tell you about the four categories from the security perspectives. First, as an example of the detection and the recognition, let's take a look at the GPS. The system had never been great from the security-wise. GPS calculates our position and time. But what would happen if there is a security breach on the GPS? One of the well-known GPS attacks is the GPS jamming. North Korea is known to have engaged in it, and when GPS is jammed, it becomes impossible for us to find our GPS positions. However, a much more serious problem for autonomous vehicles than the GPS jamming is GPS spoofing. GPS spoofing can make an autonomous vehicle mistakes its location. It does not know where it is. Let me show you an example of the GPS spoofing based on the experiment we did in our lab.
자동차가 돌고 있는
It looks like the vehicle is moving around the playground. Actually, this navigator is sitting still
저희가 GPS
on top of a table. And however, we did the GPS spoofing and we made it think it's moving around the playground. Maybe this doesn't seem like a big deal. I will show you how this will affect a Tesla that is engaged in the autonomous driving mode.
간단히 상황에 대해서
Let me set the background for the experiment for you. Currently, Tesla is on autonomous driving mode.
이 자율주행을
It is traveling
최고 속도
in 6 km per hour.
저희가 GPS 스푸핑을 통해서
And with the GPS spoofing, we made the vehicle think that it is in a school zone where the speed limit is only 30 kilometers per hour. The video shows what happens next.
현재 60km로 달리고
The vehicle is currently at the speed of 60 kilometers per hour. With the GPS spoofing, the location suddenly changes.
10km가 되고
And the speed limit is only 30 kilometers per hour. So the vehicle decelerates to that speed rapidly.
시속 30km로 바꾸도록 되어 있습니다. 운전사는 아무것도
You can see the driver hasn't touched the vehicle control at all, but the vehicle speed changes quickly. Imagine what would happen if the same thing happened while the autonomous vehicle was moving at 100 kilometers. Likely the consequence won't be positive.
GPS도 있지만 사실은
Aside from GPS, the autonomous vehicle require many sensors.
저희가 잘 아는
These sensors include the well-known
먼 거리를 탐지할 수 있는
radar for long-distance detection, or the LiDAR, which Google is known to use very often,
카메라 센서,
or the camera sensor, which is
소리를
the
이용해서
product from the mobile eye, or the sonar, which use the ultrasound to measure the distance.
사용되고 있습니다.
There are lots of technologies engaged with the autonomous vehicle. These devices are very vulnerable to security issues, which may lead to the vehicular accident. Let's take a look at some of the video clips to see some of the specific examples.
제일 먼저는
First, we'll look at the Velodyne's LiDAR. Velodyne's LiDAR is the top product in its class,
실험한 영상을
and I'll show you a video clip of our experiment on it. They are number one manufacturer of the LiDAR. As you are aware, LiDAR uses light to recreate a 3D image of the subject or the object.
그래서 우리가 빛을 보내고
Light is sent out, and using the light that is reflected back, an image is constructed.
빛을 보내고 빛을 받게
The device, therefore, needs to send out and receive the light information.
그러면 그 받는
What
곳에
if a strong light is targeted already at the light receiving component or element?
영상을 보여드리도록
Let's find out what will happen on the video clip.
여기 지금 사진에 보시면
You can see
여기 금속 재판이
that there is a metallic plate.
저희가 강한 빛을
When we
주시면
emit a strong light on it, the metallic plate disappears.
빛을 끄면
And when we turn it off,
금속 재판이
it
생깁니다.
reappears.
현재
Right now, the metallic plate is disappeared.
빛을 끄면 다시
When I turn the razor off, it comes back.
다시 보시면
Let's take a look at again. If you see it here,
방금 전에 사라지는 걸 보여드리고
the
그리고
plate
저희가
disappeared.
만약 라이다에서
Also,
빛을 여러 개
LiDAR sends many different light signals, and by chance, illusionary effect can occur. We'll look at a case where Velodyne's device create an illusionary effect.
여기 보시면 이렇게 점들이 마치 저에게 가까이 오는
And you can see as if those dots are coming close to me.
있습니다. 이런 거 같이 라이다
This occurs both in LiDAR and radar.
어떤 신호를
These technologies sense objects by measuring the time signals
물체를
that are reflected back. But the reflection is easy to be counterfeited. So it is really easy to cause some illusionary effect or even the blindness to the receiving end. Next, let's look at the camera sensors. We've done testing on another global top product from the Mobileye. As you know, Mobileye has more than 80% of the global market share in the camera sensor, and they were recently acquired by the company Intel. One of the strengths of the Mobileye is if, for an example, Mobileye sensor is placed here, and if you hook that to the PC, and you can see this kind of message. And there are two obstacles. So one is car, and it shows what is the size of the car and what car it is. The second obstacle is a bike, and it is standing still. Mobileye is able to distinguish these kind of information. It is a very powerful system. We did some tests on the Mobileye camera sensors. Let me explain the experiment setup that you are seeing on the screen right now. There's a smart TV on top of a table, and you can see the YouTube video is being played. And 3 meters away from the TV, a Mobileye camera sensor is installed. And the information coming from it can be seen here, as it can be connected by the cable to a PC. And we discussed just before, obstacle information are being shown here. And you can see the obstacle information. The obstacle is a car. But there is one thing that you needed to understand. This screen is played on the smart TV. Smart TV playing the YouTube. And the camera sensor or the artificial intelligence is saying it is about the vehicle information. It is about the car. That's the only thing it can do. So there is a clear gap between a camera sensor can see and a human eyes can see. This gap can be exploited in various ways. We'll try a relatively low-tech attack. The camera sensor is basically a camera. What happens when a camera is pointed at a high light? It goes blind. So then what would happen if camera sensors were to see a backlit scene? Let's take a look at the video. And we'll turn on the laser point here. When the green laser point is turned on, the camera sensor suddenly cannot detect anything. Imagine if an autonomous vehicle were traveling 160 kilometers per hour, but suddenly it is blinded. What action should they take? The choice of the AI must take is not that easy. Mobileye, which is used in many autonomous vehicles, is very adept at image recognition. And we did some manipulation on the image to see whether Mobileye can recognize the image. The first one is, yes, it's a vehicle. When we erase some of it, when we erase some of the wheels or the blacked out image, the answer from the Mobileye was like this. And they say the 3 pictures are the vehicles. However, the last one is not a vehicle. So we thought that's very interesting. The students at our lab played around with this idea a bit further and showed the Mobileye these cartoons. The Mobileye said, yes, they are cars. So we started to have some doubt about the Mobileye sensors. Why did Mobileye recognize obvious drawing as cars? We decided to explain this a bit further using the image manipulations. This image that had been recognized as a car previously was recognized as a car even though we put a box around it. It recognized it as a car even though there is a box around it. What happens to this hippopotamus top on the image? Still, it is recognized as a car. It is clear that Mobileye's image recognition and our perception have a wide gap. This gap can be exploited for attacks. So, we've been looking at the camera sensor's basic functionality. Let's see it in action in the real life when paired with the Tesla AEB and it is exposed to an attack. The first clip is a dry run with no attacks. The pedals are not engaged. As you can see, the autonomous driving function is running fine. When an obstacle is encountered, the car stops before it hits it. It successfully detected the car. Please note on this next run whether the car in front of was detected. The car was detected, but it suddenly disappeared, and Tesla shot it through. What happened? A Tesla car uses camera sensors to detect obstacles, but we shot a strong laser at the Tesla's camera sensor. An autonomous vehicle was blinded and lost track of the obstacles. The obstacle was shown in red. Let me pause the video and show you. Please wait. The car will turn. Note, the Tesla detects the car that's in front of it, but Tesla's radar that detects the car in front of it. So the radar sees the car in the front. But we shot the laser at the camera. Yet, the car in front suddenly disappears. And though the car in front is perceived by the radar, but the autonomous vehicle runs into the obstacle. Radar detection, however, it suddenly disappears and boom. So, Tesla does not use radar as its primary perception device, but relies on camera more. If the camera sensors are exploited, it can lead to an accident, such as this. This experiment wasn't from our lab, but from an Israeli lab. They used a beam projector to project an image of a person. This shows that Tesla recognized an image projected onto the street, mistaking it for a real person, and the car was stopped, even though that was just an image.
지금까지 센서와 AI 이두 가지
We have examined the sensors and the AI of an autonomous vehicle, but there can be numerous software devices that make up a vehicle as well,
예를 들어서
such as
오디오
an
시스템,
audio system,
블루투스,
Bluetooth devices,
타이어 프레셔,
tire pressure sensors, Wi-Fi, GPS,
위성 통신,
satellite communications,
것들이
etc. There are many components
이런 애들이 자율주행차
which can be used to create an autonomous vehicle environment.
여기 나와 있는 2011년 논문에서
The 2011 paper shown here shows that when each of these devices exhibit software security issues,
자동차를
the vehicle
해킹할
can
수
be
있음도 보여주고
hacked.
있습니다. 결론을 내리도록 하겠습니다.
Let me summarize this way.
자율자동차 및
Autonomous vehicles and the part makers,
보안의 초보자의
security solutions are still at their beginning stage.
현재 테슬라 같은
Tesla's software security
소프트웨어
was very tight, but the sensor security was still vulnerable to attacks.
실제로 이 센서 보안을
Whether autonomous vehicle makers can secure their sensors is still questionable. Software security, of course, must be airtight. However, every year, new vulnerabilities are exposed as time goes by. Finally, in Korea, we talk about autonomous vehicles in the context of the telecommunication infrastructure. But note, in the US, for example, there are lots of places where not even a basic transceiver station is in place. Would the US autonomous vehicle companies use mobile telecommunications to power their autonomous vehicles? Just for the autonomous vehicle? Will they control autonomous care through the mobile telecommunication? Can they do it? My belief is that for the autonomous vehicles, the issue of real-time telecommunications, the CITS, won't become a global issue in the near future. This concludes my lecture. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening.
네, 감사합니다. 카이스트
Thank you, Professor Kim from KAIST. He talked about the autonomous driving and security.
Q&A를 위해서
Now let's get into the Q&A. Professor Kim,
교수님 안녕하세요.
are you online?
네, 안녕하세요.
Hi.
네, 교수님 우선 바쁘신 와중에도
Professor
이렇게
Kim,
참석해
thank you
주셔서
very much for
진심으로
taking time
감사드립니다.
out of a busy
강연 잘
schedule. Thank you
들었고요.
very much for the wonderful lecture.
네, 그리고 직접 만나 뵙지 못해서 정말
I feel so sorry that we cannot meet you in person,
많은 분들께서 온라인으로
but
함께
there are
계시거든요.
online questions and many people are listening to you online. We got some questions to you. And without further ado, let's get into the Q&A. The first question is this. In your presentation, you talked about the sensor vulnerabilities.
완성차라든가 또는 센서 분야의 산업계에서도 이러한
The
취약점이
OEMs or
존재하고
the
있을까요?
sensor manufacturers are aware of these vulnerabilities. Yes, we wrote down the paper, and that was published in many of the global conferences. I am sure OEMs and the manufacturers do understand that.
갑자기 영상이 끊어졌는데요.
We lost Professor Kim.
네, 여러분 죄송합니다. 지금 잠시
Please
저희
excuse
인터넷
us,
상의
and
연결 문제로
there's
인해서
some
잠시 교수님의 영상이
internet
끊어졌습니다.
connection issue.
바로
We
영상을
lost Professor
접속하는
Kim.
대로 다시 이어가도록
Please,
하겠습니다.
please wait for a while.
죄송합니다.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm sorry. I'm back.
여보세요?
네, 교수님.
네.
그런데
죄송합니다.
지금 화면이 보이지 않거든요.
Yes, Professor Kim. We can hear you, but we cannot see you.
화면 켰는데요. 잠시만요.
I turn it on.
화면을 돌려주시겠어요?
됐나요?
Can you see me?
됐습니다.
네, 이제 보입니다.
Okay.
네, 교수님 감사합니다.
그래서
네.
회사에서
계속해
잘
주시죠.
알고
And I believe the companies are aware of those vulnerabilities.
이 문제를 풀기가 너무
However, it's really difficult to resolve these issues. That is why there is not so much
네,
progress.
그러면 여기에 덧붙여서 질문
And adding
드릴게요.
on, I have another
현재
question.
진전이 없다고 하셨는데
And you
그걸
said
좀
there
보완하기
is a
위해서
little
여러 가지
progress.
노력이
However, there must have been lots of effort to enhance the security. What do you think are the measures they are taking? As far as I know, for the sensor security, well, there is only little progress. Is it only about Korea? I mean, globally. For the sensor security, Tesla is the global #1 company for doing that. However, still, Tesla even did not make a big progress about the sensor security. And you talked about the Tesla, and the next question is related to Tesla. Let me read out the question for you. You talked about the sensors, especially about the Tesla brand. I'm wondering whether that is the case for the many of the Korean OEMs. Sensor manufacturers are not developing the safe sensors, so probably the story will be the same to many of the Korean OEMs because simply they are buying the sensors from the global manufacturers. I believe the issue is pretty much similar to that of Tesla. The sensor security is not well developed, and in Korea, even the software security is in its infancy. So, I personally believe the autonomous vehicle is not ready for the commercialization from the security perspectives. That is an issue, and many people are concerned about the security about the autonomous vehicle. And that is why, as you brought up the security issue, yes, thank you very much. Now we are into the Q&A. If you have any questions, please pose your questions or post your questions, and you can directly ask the question to Dr. Kim. Yes, that was it. Thank you very much for taking your time, Professor Kim, and thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you.
네, 저희 지금 자율협력 주행이라는 주제로 세미나를 이어가고 있습니다.
We are having the conference towards the end of the session. As for the autonomous vehicles, we need to have many different systems fully in place in order to have a fully connected vehicles and road. That's why we have a number of experts invited to this forum. And thank you for sharing your knowledge and ideas. And let's move on to the last and final presentation. We have one more presentation to be made, so let me invite the speaker. The speaker is from Thales, and Taung Vikao will be making the presentation. Mr. Vikao Taung.
Hello, Mr. Vikao. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, first of all, very pleasure to have you for your speech.
For us to Thales, we are really happy to be invited into this presentation. Yeah.
Okay, so are you ready?
Yes.
So please begin your presentation.
Yes. So next slide, please. This presentation is mainly showing the recent progress of the deployment at Europe Union, right? So the system is a CCMS, meaning that is the CITS, the Security Credential Management System. Right? So this presentation doesn't focus on technical or technology topic, neither cryptographic or specification. But however, this presentation shows rather the practical aspect of the EU CCMS. How does it work in the real life situation and what are available right now? I am Vico Tang, the solution architect in Thales, and Pierre Girard, my colleague, the product marketing manager, is also on the show. Thales is a French multinational company with several business lines: defense, aerospace, avionics, ground transport, and digital identity and security. So Thales operates in 68 countries and has 83,000 of employees, and the revenue is 19 billion euro last year. In the context of the EU CCMS, Thales is in fact a contractor of European Commission, and we are implementing the European TLM, the Trust List Manager of CCMS. We'll go into this detail later. Thales also participates to the CITS Security Expert Group hosted by the European Commission. So next slide, please. In this slide, we are using different documents as reference, such that you can understand. If you want to go into more detail, you have some reference here. So the first three documents are coming from the European Commission. The certificate policy document, this defines the European CITS trust model based on the PKI and within the scope of the EU CCMS. So the certificate policy, we abbreviate it to CP. The CP defines the requirement to manage public key certificates issued by entity, just like the root CA, the EA. EA means Enrollment Authority, and the AA is Authorization Authority, right? So the CP, this document also defines the usage of this certificate by entities such as the CITS stations. At the highest level, the PKI composed of a set of root CAs. So these root CAs are enabled by the fact that their certificates are put into the Trust List Manager issued European Certificate Trust List, the ECTL. Right? We'll go into this detail later. Yeah. And the second document is the security policy document. It defines the security policy in terms of information security, risk assessment, risk treatment, and the compliance with this document, this security policy. All the other three documents are technical specification issued by IEEE and ETSI. This specification ensures the interoperability among all the PKI participants, meaning UCA, EAAA, CITS station, RSU, etc. Right. Next slide, please. So this slide shows three main boxes. On the top, we have the Certificate Policy Authority, CPA. And then on the left-hand side, we have a box, a dot-like box containing all the common European elements. On the right-hand side, we have all the other PKI participants. And I'll go into the detail, right? So the European Commission is running a EU Root CA pilot project. And this pilot project includes all the boxes on the left-hand side. So we have mainly the CPOC, meaning the CITS point of contact. We'll go into detail also later. We have the TLM, the Trust List Manager, which is a subcontract to Thales. We have the ECTL, which is a piece of static information regularly published by the TLM and CPOC. And then we have a root CA and two elements, EA and AA. So all these elements are operated by Atos, another company on behalf of the European Commission. So the European Commission runs all these EU root CA as well as EA for those European countries of public and private actors that they don't want to run their own root CA or EA or AA. So they can rely on the European Commission run root CA, EA, and AA, right? On the right-hand side, we have a dot-like box containing the root CA, and all these EA, AA, they can be operated by public and private sectors, private actors. So normally the TLM publish regularly on a quarter basis the ECTL, and all the other PKI participants can download the ECTL, and the ECTL will build the trust anchor of the whole European system, right? And so in the past, I think that you have already attended a lot of shows for the presentation of the interaction between the Root CA, EA, and AA. However, this presentation shows mainly the interaction between the Root CA and the CPOC. This is something changing. We are focusing only on this point in this presentation. Right? And this will be, we are explaining you how the Root CA can obtain the topmost trust anchor, which is the TLM certificate. Right? Next slide, please. So here are a list of all the acronyms used in the EU CCMS. I don't go into the detail, but I just want to mention the CPA, the Certificate Policy Authority. In fact, this is not a single person or entity. It is a group of entities which include the European Commission, the representative from 27 European member states, and the representative of public and private actors. So this group is in charge of the evolution of the certificate policy document. Let's say in the future, for example, the cryptographic key length will change, the key algorithm will change, all new use cases and new requirements. So this, the CPA is in charge of the evolution of this CP document. They are also in charge of authorizing the enrollment of new candidate Root CA. So they will analyze, for example, the audit report and the compliance of the certificate policy by the Root CA organization. Right? So this is the role of the CPA. Next slide, please. And now we are going into the focus on the CPOC. The CPOC is the CITS point of contact. So behind the CPOC, there are several elements, in fact. Firstly, it is a physical location located at Ispra, a small town at Italy. And from this physical location, you will have an interaction with a human being, with officers, and there will be some interaction at the beginning with the Root CA, we call it AR, authorized representative, right? So some Root CA organization employee, we have some interaction with the CPOC officer. We'll go into detail on this point later. The CPOC also has a website from which we can obtain the document or information and how to interact with the CPOC. We can also download the ECTL or TLM certificate from this website. There's also an email address from which you can discuss with the CPOC officer. An endpoint such as it can be URL, it can be machine readable format, so you can download the TLM certificate as well as the TLM link certificate message and the ECTL. TLM link certificate message is somewhat a new element in the recent change. Let's say that suppose that you are in a rekey, TLM rekey situation. You have a new a current TLM certificate which arrives to the end of date of his private key usage period, and you need to rekey a new TLM certificate, right? So the TLM link certificate message is a cryptographic proof saying that the current TLM certificate will endorse the new TLM certificate. So this is something new in the last year. The last element is a CPOC publish also an exchange protocol. This secure exchange protocol is inside the CPOC protocol document, which is in the reference, right? So it tells exactly what will be the procedure, how we can interact with the CPOC, such that we can get the trust anchor as well as the TLM certificate. Right? Next slide, please. The second element will be the TLM, the Trust List Manager. The TLM has in fact a registry which contains the TLM certificate, all the registered root CA certificates, as well as their distribution center URL. Each root CA has its own URL from which other elements in the PKI, such as the EA and the AA, they can obtain the CTL, the certificate trust list, as well as the CRL, the certificate revocation list through this DC URL, the distribution center URL. Initially, the DC URL was managed by each root CA, and in the recent evolution, the last 1 year, the ECTL now contains the root CA certificate as well as their DC URL. So the TLM provides mainly the following features. It manages the lifecycle of TLM certificate as well as all the registered root CA certificate in the registry. The TLM also implements use cases for the CPOC, like the generation of TLM certificate, rekey generation of the TLM link certificate message, and also registration of the root CA certificate and all the rekey and revocation of RCA certificate. That's one interesting use case that is handled by TLM, which is the exit and take over use case. Since the whole European system will last for almost 20 to 40 years, so some company will come into the market and some other company will leave the market, right? Just like any root CA organization, they can come into the market and they can leave the market. So that's a use case for exiting RCA organization, which will hand over the responsibility of the RCA certificate management into a takeover RCA organization. Right? So this is also one interesting use case. And on the other hand, the TLM also periodically generate the ECTL. Currently, it's based on a quarter basis, and this is a nominal publication cycle. However, if in urgent situation like a RCA certificate revocation, there could be an on-demand case to publish in urgent one ECTL. So the TLM is in charge to generate the ECTL, and the CPOC is in charge to publish the ECTL on its own website. Right. Next slide, please. And then we are speaking now the ECTL. The ECTL is a piece of static file which is published regularly by the CPOC. Inside the ECTL, in fact, that's a kind of snapshot of picture of all the valid TLM as well as RCA certificate inside the TLM registry. So the ECTL contains some basic information, a sequence number, such that we can understand from which is the current ECTL release, the next publication date, and all the active or pre-end of life TLM certificate, all the root CA certificates and their DC URL, the CPOC URL, as well as the TLM certificate, which is used to sign the ECTL and the signature of the ECTL, right? So all this information, we call it the full ECTL because it's a whole snapshot of the registry, right? Now we have a second concept, we call it the delta ECTL. The delta ECTL is the incremental change between the previous full ECTL and the current full ECTL releases. This is somewhat a similar concept as the database backup. You have a full database backup, and then you have a daily only incremental backup. So the Delta ECTL is a somewhat similar concept. It contains all the changes between the previous food backup and the current one. Right? So to ensure that the CITS stations, or as well as all the other PKI participants, can download the ECTL and can interpret the content of the ECTL deterministically. The TLM always follow one rule. The rule is on the slides, right? So the full ECTL of release N, it is always equal to the full ECTL release N-1 merging with the Delta ECTL release N. Sorry. Yeah. And currently, the Delta ECTL is still not mandatory. It's included in all the ETSI specifications, but is not published yet by the CPOC, by the European Commission. Right. It's considered as a test feature for the moment. Next slide, please. So to ease the deployment at Europe, the European Commission has provided 3 levels of services. The first level is the L0. The L0 is, we have L0, L1, and L2. The L0 is offered for the interoperability test reason, right? So mainly, there's no audit required, no strict compliance to the certificate policy is required. The L0 service is already available today, so we have a TLM certificate corresponding to the L0. We have a ECTL L0, and all this information are already available, downloadable through the CPOC, right? And the European Commission will allow the stakeholder to use all these services on a case-per-case basis. Right? You need to write to the European Commission to enroll to this ECTL. The L1 is somewhat service level between the L0 and the L2. The L2 is a full production system. However, the L1 is something in between. So it has a longer operation interval. It's not here for forever. It's really limited in time, the L1. So a certificate, a TLM certificate will also have a longer period. And the goal is to push all the operators or the stakeholders running in L1 to migrate into the L2 over time, right? So all the L1 stakeholder, the participant, they don't require to have an audit of the compliance for the certificate policy. However, the root CA, the EA, and the AA, they have already processes and requirements which are very, very close to the full compliance of the audit, right? There's still no audit, but everything is really very close to the audit status. Right? So if there are any exceptions, and this exception will be very limited, and the CPA will also clearly define the operation scope of this L1. Right? So the L1 is dedicated for the root CA and CITS station that meet the CPA requirement, but and also they start to operate the CITS day 1 services. Day 1 services meaning all the CAM, DAN messages. Day 1 services are ITS services, and all these day 1 services are specified in one ETSI specification. So if you want to understand the content, please take a look in this specification. And this concerns the L1. So next slide, please. The L2 is really a full production system. So it requires the full audit, meaning that, well, the auditor will witness the generation of the private key inside the HSM of the Route CA, and also all the certificate practice statement, the CPS, the audit will have a look on it, and the solution will be deployed in a data center which is compliant to the ISO norm. All these things will be completely audited. Right. So the EU Route CA, do you remember the box on the left-hand side of the previous slide? This is the Route CA run by the European Commission, right? So this Route CA will be fully audited by the end of this year, and the TLM will also be able to provide the level 2 ECTL by the end of this year. Yeah. There's still some detail, but they are subject to the discussion by the CPA. Okay. And then next slide, please. So now for the L0 and the L1, in fact, the procedure will be much simplified because this is not a production system, so everything can go through email exchange between the Route CA organization and the CPOC officer, right, and the CPA. However, the L2 requires a much formal procedure because of security, because of the trust anchor. So in this slide, we are detailed the L2 enrollment and registration procedure. All these procedures are described in the CPOC protocol document in the reference, and they are inside the Annex 2 to 5. Right? So the summary of this L2 enrollment and registration procedure is in this slide. Firstly, in this, there's a three steps procedure. In the step 1, the Route CA organization shall enroll to the CPOC. Right. So this means that the Route CA shall send a document which is called the enrollment form. The detail of this enrollment form is in one annex of the CPOC protocol document. So this document will be manually or digitally signed, right, by the CPA organization. And the Route CA will send, organization will send this enrollment form through email to the CPA. The CPA will study the enrollment condition and will deliver an enrollment approval form. We will come into to next slide. We will discuss the information inside this enrollment form or all this paper part. Right. So this step requires only email exchange. The second step, we call it the route certificate registration. Here, this is a specific step because the Route CA organization shall send its AR authorized representative or a courier to the CPOC entry. The AR, the authorized representative, shall normally be a manager of the business line of the Route CA organization. And the courier, the trust courier, will be the person who will be physically travel to ISPRA at Italy and will be physically present in front of the CPOC officer, right? So there are two different roles in the CPOC organization that we clarify. And in this step 2, the Route CA organization will submit a manual or digital signed application form. This is another document to the CPOC entry. So the courier will bring this application form at the entry point of the CPOC and present it to the officer. And in return, the courier or the AR will receive the TLM certificates, right? So this is a completely out-of-band transmission of the TLM certificate, and one by one transmission. It's not going through any electronic media, right? And so this this TLM certificate will be the trust anchor inside the Route CA organization. We will come into this trust anchor later, right? So this is the step 2. And the step 3 will be a Route CA certificate publication inside the ECTL. In the step 2, if the CPA allow the registration of the route CA certificate, the CPA will inform the CPOC, and the CPOC will register the RCA certificate into the TLM registry, and the TLM will publish this registry every quarter. Right. So once the route CA certificate is inside the ECTL, every CITS station vehicle within Europe, 27 countries can download the ECTL and can be aware of all the route CA issued. They are valid among all the 27 European countries, right? This is how the European system works with a single ECTL, European Certificate Trust List, and making all this route CA certificate enable inside this ECTL, such that all the European cars can download the CTCL and can understand if I am a route CA in France, I can understand that there's another route CA in Germany or other countries, and we can, in this case, interact together and trust each other. The message are signed by the trust chain, which are going back to one route CA certificate inside the ECTL, right? So one more thing is the electronics side, the document. Let's suppose that there's an urgent case, right? Like the revocation certificate revocation. So it's an urgent situation. So if in urgent situation, we shall not travel to Italy, right? Physical travel. So in this case, if there's something digital signed document put in place, we can rely on the digital signature to avoid the physical travel, right? So the European Commission is relying on the norm called the EIDAS. EIDAS means Electronic Identification, Authentication, and Trust Service. This is a European scope trust service already deployed in 27 European countries since the beginning of last year. And they provide identity service for companies and individuals, and allowing trust service and exchange among all the legal entities in Europe, right? So the trust service include document signing, PDF document signing, or verification of the signer identity. And if the route CA organization provide this identity, EIDAS identity, then we can put in place the digital sign, and we can avoid all the urgency, physical travel in case of current urgent situations. Sorry, yeah. Next slide, please. So let's go back to step 1 and step 2. And step 1, the enrollment form. Normally, the enrollment forms shall have some information concerning the route CA organization. For example, the registry number in the commercial department, the commercial ministry, sorry, and also all the information related to the authorized representative, the AR, or the trust courier. All these persons shall one day physically travel to the CPOC entry. So this representative, like their ID card or their passport, there shall be a preliminary exchange between the organization and the CPOC, right? So this concerns the information in the enrollment form. If the CPA approves the enrollment of the route CA, the CPA will allocate one, we call it the CPA ID, which is a number to identify the route CA organization. So all this information will be returned into the enrollment approval form from the CPA. In the step 2, the route CA will generate a route CA certificate, and the certificate name will contain the CPA ID part, right? So when courier will travel to the CPOC entry. He or she will bring the application form, and also the courier will also bring the routier certificate, the fingerprint of the certificate, any cryptographic information, for example, the URL of the distribution center, as well as all the AID, the application ID, meaning all the ITS services included in this certificate, as well as all the SSP values and bit mask and so on. So this information will need require the approval, right? And also since the routier certificate life cycle now is defined as 5 years. So this means that there will be a physical travel for the routier organization only every 5 years and not every year, right? However, if there are other kind of operation like the rekey, after 5 years, you need to travel to CPOC to rekey the routier certificate, right? And there's also all the other types of operation that will be included inside the application form. Next slide, please. So once the CPA has studied all this submission form, the CPA will approve the registration, inform the CPOC, and the CPOC will register the routier certificate into the TLM registry, and the TLM registry will publish every quarter all the registered RCA certificate into the ECTL and make it available through the CPOC URL, such that all the European car can download this ECTL, right? So this slide will conclude all the European, the current, the recent deployment and the European Commission effort on the European V2X CITS deployment at Europe. Right? Now we are able to take all the question answer from you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So is it finished? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, for, Mr. Bika, for your valuable presentation. Now we are going to have Q&A session with you. And for the Q&A session, we have invited another speaker, Mr. Pierre, for a Q&A session. Hello, Mr. Pierre.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Can you see me?
Yes, I can see you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can see you as well.
Fine.
Well, we have 3 questions for you. And my first 2 questions are for Mr. Pierre, and the last one is for Mr. Bika. Okay?
We can interchange. We can discuss together.
Okay.
However, no
Okay.
problem. Yeah.
So the first question is, what is the big difference between North America's SCMS and CCMS of Europe? Who's going to answer?
Yes, I'm going to answer this one. So in fact, I would say there are 2 different. The first one is cultural or political, if you wish, and the second one is technical. Culturally speaking, in fact, there is a difference because in Northern America, people are not going to trust a central entity like a government. They prefer to rely on the market, let's say. So it implies a difference in the technical. Okay. And this difference in the technical is that instead of signing the certificate with the unique entity, which is a TLM, in fact, you have different entities that can sign, which are so-called electors. Okay. And those electors, they could be members of an industry consortium, even if it's not definitively fixed, but we can imagine a consortium of industry, okay, and these electors can sign, of course, not all, it will be N of N electors, okay, and if N of electors among the M sign, the certificate from the routier will be trusted, Okay? And you have another stage, which is the meta organization, let's say, where the electors organize themselves to trust themselves. So you have another system where electors can vote to add a new electors or to revoke an existing elector. So that's basically the system where as it is. And then, of course, you can download the certificate signed by the electors. Of course, you have other difference, but I've mainly explained the top level difference, as Vico explained the top level TLM system in the EU. For example, just to give you a few examples, you can download in advance a lot of certificates, like a North American car can download 3,000 certificates for up to a few years. Okay? And of course, as you have the system of downloading a lot of certificates, you need to be able to revoke them. And this revocation is kind of complex because if you revoke those thousands of certificates just the day after you issue them, you would in theory add 3,000 entries into a CRL if you use a CRL, certificate revocation list. So to avoid that, there is a system with another entity called link entity, LA, that will avoid using CRL with thousands of entries. But I've no time to develop that. So there are many other differences.
Okay, thank you for the
just
answer.
one comment is
Okay, you
also
can add
the US system use both implicit and explicit certificate, and the EU system use mainly the explicit certificates. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, thank you. And I'm give you the second question. The second question is in terms of the privacy policy. So how do you just manage the autonomous vehicles collecting personal information? What's your policy in terms of that?
So the policy is quite classical, so meaning that if you remember the PKI scheme, you have a separation between EA and AA. Okay, so EA will deliver long-term certificate with pseudonym, but this EA will have a way to link, let's say, the vehicle identity number to its regular pseudonym contained into this long-term certificate. This long-term certificate won't be used to sign messages that are broadcasted by the car. Okay, so there is no way to intercept if you listen what is broadcasted by the car. There is no way to intercept this long-term pseudonym. However, this long-term certificate will be used to connect to the AA to obtain the short-term certificate. Okay? And those short-term certificates will also contain pseudonym, and you will have many different certificates per car per week. Okay? Let's say 20 certificates valid at the same time for the same car per week. And the car will randomly switch between those certificates when you will try. Okay, so that it will be complex to correlate one certificate to the next. Okay, so there will be no linkability or very low linkability. Okay, then it's a question of tuning how many certificates you will use. So it will be a trade-off between privacy and efficiency, because if you want to have a lot of privacy, then you can download a lot, potentially hundreds of certificates per week, but it will have a cost in terms of infrastructure. Okay, and there is also separation between EA and AA. Okay, because when you come to the AA, you just come with a pseudonym certificate, so there is no way from the AA to link this pseudonym with the VIN of the car, the vehicle identification number. So of course, if AA and EA collide, okay, if they group their information, there will be a way to track the car from the VIN down to the random certificate that will be used for signing broadcasting message. And so that's why there is a legal requirement to that the EA and AA are run by separate entities. Okay, meaning that could be, for example, different legal entities with completely different employees in different sites, not geographically at the same place. Vico, do you have something to add?
No, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And now I'm going to give you the last question. So, if there is a movement between countries within the Europe, then how could it be possible to validate the CV security certification?
Yeah, I think that this question is somewhat already, sorry, implicitly answered by the show. In fact, let's say that there's a French car and a German car, right? And the French car will travel abroad to Germany, and the French car has already downloaded the ECTL, right, the European Certificate Trust List, as well as the German car, because this ECTL is available for all the European cars inside Europe. So if a German car is sending a message to the German car, and the message is signed by a certificate issued by a routier inside in France, and this routier is already registered to the CIPOC, and the routier certificate is also inside the ECTL, and then the message will be received by a German car, and the German car will analyze the signer of this message, get its certificate, and if the reception car is running through the certificate chain validation, it will walk up the certificate chain until it reaches the routier certificate of the French company, and if this routier certificate is also inside the ECTL, which is a trust anchor, then the German car can trust the French car. So this is how the ECTL will be, in fact, the trust anchor of the whole European system. How the different cars from different countries can trust it together.
Okay,
So I
thank you.
finished the answer.
Okay, is there something that you have to add, Mr. Pierre?
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answer and also taking your valuable time to join us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for the invitation.
Thank you.
네, 여러분 장시간 동안 저희 이
It has been long for you to join the seminar 2020. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. In the future, we will have more sessions so that we can share information and knowledge so that we can create better environment for the CITS. This brings us to the end of the seminar. And from tomorrow onwards, we are going to have a testing for the interoperability until Friday at this Suwon Convention Center. I hope all of you join us till tomorrow and till Friday. Once again, thank you very much for joining us today, online and offline. Thank you.